wage to $12 an hour would save American taxpayers $17 billion in public assistance spending. That because many corporations pay workers so little they qualify for public assistance programs.
The point is that if we want low-income families to be able to have a decent life, we need to take a closer look at what they're being paid and what we're expecting of businesses. Big corporations are achieving extraordinary profits at the same time that their workers are relying on food stamps.
Cooper says huge tax savings are possible through raising wages.
Well, there are many things we could do to lift wages, but the most straightforward is to raise the minimum wage. Increasing the federal minimum wage to $12 by 2020 would lift wages for over 35 million workers nationwide and generate about $17 billion in savings to government assistance programs. That $17 billion could then be used to make our anti-poverty programs stronger or make long overdue investments in education or public infrastructure.
The Chicago Teachers Union says privatized nursing services are driving Chicago schools to the brink of a health crisis. A report called Nursing Services at CPS says an epidemic of outsourced nursing services is affecting the health of 400,000 students throughout the Chicago school district. The union will present its findings to the school board Wednesday. The Chicago Teachers Union says RCM Technologies got a $30 million contract from the school district in 2015, but the union says the company is failing to meet its obligations. Some school nurses are reporting stories of RCM staff untrained to deliver basic tasks and a high turnover rate for outsourced nurses. The union says this outsourcing of nurses is designed to ultimately eliminate union nursing jobs, replacing them with temporary nurses with no job protection or employment benefits. Teamsters workers Tuesday protested the $10.3 billion purchase of Airgas by the French company Air Liquide. Bringing their protest to the Houston headquarters of Airgas, the workers demanded that Air Liquide stop its attacks on workers and their unions. Teamsters General Secretary-Treasurer Ken Hall says Air Liquide and Airgas have been conducting a campaign of wage discrimination, threatening workers with loss of health care, benefits, and wages during collective bargaining, and attempts at union busting by threatening union activists. The Teamsters say the company would never get away with treating its French workers this way.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender, offering a wide range of treasury management services designed to control cost, improve cash flow, and simplify accounting for unions. Online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Last night, Trump, I guess, winning. Winning. That seemed to be the word, winning. I wanted, if the drinking game last night was winning, a lot of inebriated people walking around today, a lot of hangovers today, as Trump, who, I think everyone knew Trump was going to take Nevada, winning. The interesting thing is watching the Rubio and Cruz elbow at each other for second place. I'm becoming more to the point and really kind of afraid, very, very afraid of the possibility of the Donald being the presidential nominee. Now, there are those, I have friends who go, that's what we want. We want the Donald because the sane people of this country will then come out in mass and vote down the hairpiece and vote down the xenophobia and the hatred and vote down all of the bad stuff. Yeah. I would like to live in the deluded world in which you live, in which you currently reside. That scares me because that's exactly what they said back in 1980. And as you know, 1980 was one of those years where the crazy guy won. And the crazy guy won overwhelmingly. And that's what worries me. That, at least, the Republican establishment, I can't believe I'm going to say this, not overly crazy. But I look at Trump and a Rubio and yeah, they are crazy. So I don't have a beep button. Holy, my goodness, what are we left? Now, there are those who say it'll be a sweep. Trump will get, and I hope that to be the case. But here's one of those moments last night where Donald Trump actually said, and now nothing surprises me. I mean, he got away with, I could shoot somebody in New York and get away with it and still go up. He got away with that. And you go, okay, a little bravado. He actually said, the words that actually came out of his mouth is, I love uneducated people. I love stupid people. I mean, wow. I mean, really, wow. And the people cheered. We love and that, I think, says a lot for the Republican Party. Because now we're finding, maybe as I've been saying, Nate Silver, I believe Nate Silver is right. 35% is about as high nationally as he will go. But last night, 46%. And you go, oh. Now, understand, Nevada always been kind of a little weird. And this is just the Republican voters. Little side tidbit thing that's a little scary. Trump actually got more votes in this caucus than all of the votes totaled in the 2012 caucus. So he's getting people all tingly in the panties and all worked up and all woo, as where the Romney, well, not so much. So again, be careful what we wish for, especially my Democratic friends who seem to think that he would be an easy beat. I don't buy that. Now, the hope is that when he becomes the guy, which he's been the guy for a long time, but the hope is then the mainstream media goes, maybe we should be looking into his business deals. Maybe just kind of a thought we should look at everything he's done. Because to this point, there really hasn't been any of that. There's been nothing other than he says something stupid, and they give him all kinds of airtime to say something even dumber. And it just keeps growing, and the uneducated people that he seems to love so much, they gobble it up. I mean, this is like, wow. I mean, just that's the word I can come up with. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. What does a T-Rump presidency look like? And is it any worse than a Cruz, Rubio, Kasich, Ben Carson? No, stop. No, don't even go there. Ben Carson, he just doesn't want to learn to play piano. But here's the thing. What does that look like? What does it mean for workers? What's going to happen? What kind of a vision for the future can we expect? I would argue that we have no idea what Donald Trump land looks like, other than it's gold-plated, other than gaudy, early 1970s kind of really gaudy. Nah, that's about it. What does it look like? Does the Donald put someone on the Supreme Court who's just as crazy as Scalia? He says so, but we'll see. Also today, the big news, if anyone paying attention here in Pennsylvania, sad news, our governor has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I like the email he sent out today. I thought it was well thought out. I thought it was a smart thing. He says, look, I'm a 60-some-year-old guy. Every year I go for a checkup. Every year I know I have risks for certain things. My doctor knows my name. My doctor knows my history. We go through every year and we make sure that nothing grows and grows and grows and grows without someone paying attention to it. They caught the prostate cancer very early. His prognosis is very good. This is a very treatable form. He will be fine. There are thousands and thousands of people before him who have had this and have had this treatment, and they're fine. I like the fact that he came out and said, look, this wasn't luck. This was not luck. This wasn't my lucky day. This was thought out. I go to the doctor every year. I do my appointment thing. We have tests. We do all the preventative stuff to catch it early so that, guess what? We can live. Wow, there's a concept of preventative health care, of going and following up so that you catch things early, and it might save your life. Now, what interests me and why I bring this up, other than the fact that we wish the governor nothing but the best of health, a speedy recovery, all of that stuff, there are those on the right, there are those in the T-Rump world, in the Rubio, Cruz, Kasich, the whole 9 yards, there are all of those folks over there on the right who want to deny a large segment of the population access to those life-saving, preventable preventions, those life-saving screenings yearly, those life-saving checkups, because they want to go back and destroy the Affordable Care Act and take us back to the good old days of if you've got a job and you can afford to pay for it, you have the best health care money could buy. If not, screw you, die. And that is really where they want to take us. So today we'll talk a little bit more about pay or die, talk a little bit about the policies that the right wants to take us to. But like I said, I wish nothing but the best for our governor and hope for a speedy recovery, because the first thing that came up is I wondered if the Republicans had found the prostate cancer since they've been, tunneling through his policies, so to speak. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, whatever's on your mind. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, what's it look like when the T-Rump is the man? Scared. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Drug and Hospital Employees Union Local 1199 sent a telegram to President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The message declared the union's stand against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They were the first union local to take an official stand against the war. However, it should not have surprised anyone that Local 1199 was willing to take such a public stand. From their founding, they have been deeply committed to broad social justice unionism. The union started in 1932 in New York City. In the beginning, their membership was mostly Jewish men working in drugstores. During their first decade, they led pickets for a living wage and against segregation. During the 1950s, they held organizing drives in the city's not-for-profit hospitals. This brought many African American and Latino women into the union. These workers were often paid wages as low as $32 per week and worked extremely long hours. The union helped them win a $100 a week minimum wage. The union had become an important voice for workers in the city's nonprofit hospitals. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Local 1199 the authentic conscience of the labor movement. The union expanded its organizing beyond New York in 1969. They helped organize a successful strike of hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina. From there, they launched organizing campaigns of hospital workers in other states. Over the years, the union has stood in solidarity with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's efforts to organize farm workers. They opposed apartheid in South Africa. They were also an early opponent of the war in Iraq. Today, the local is affiliated with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Eric Wustewald. Even Newt Gingrich is calling out Fox News for helping create the current GOP frontrunner Donald Trump. While marveling at billionaire Trump's ability to spend the least amount of money on the campaign trail, Fox and Friends invited on the former Republican speaker, who clarified for the Fox host just how Donald Trump has managed to succeed in the Republican primary.
The billionaire is spending the least amount of money and running away with this thing.
Well,
it's going to make
that's
people...
because of you guys.
What?
Look, that's because of you guys. Donald Trump gets up in the morning, tweets to the entire planet at no cost, picks up the phone, calls you, has a great conversation for about 8 minutes, which would have cost him a ton in commercial money.
Media Matters calculated that from May 2015 through the end of last year, Fox gave nearly $30 million in free airtime to Trump, a sixth of which can be attributed to Fox and Friends. As Newt Gingrich concluded,
look, you could say that Trump is the candidate Fox and Friends invented.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
So we won the evangelicals, we won with young, we won with old, we won with highly educated, we won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated. We're the smartest people, we're the most loyal people.
Yes, I love the stupid people. Yeah, the ones who voted for me. Wow. I mean, how far down the rabbit hole do we have to go before we realize that this guy cut his teeth in the World Wrestling Federation, and what we're seeing is just a bad episode of Tuesday Night Wrestling. Wow. Just kind of one of those things. Anyway, here to talk about the poorly educated that Trump seems to love so much, and really this whole election cycle. I've asked our good friend, Attorney Erwin Aronson, to come give his thoughts. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick. And for once, I got to start by saying there's nothing legal about this topic.
No. At the end of this, this is kind of, wow, where are we going? When a presidential candidate comes out and says, I love the uneducated.
Well, it's just a continuation of a statement. I don't know if you recall this, but I'm sure many of our listeners will. When George W. Bush was campaigning for the presidency of the United States of America 16 years ago, he proudly asserted that he was a C student.
Oh, yeah.
So he was there to attract all the other C students. I always kind of thought that I wanted my president to be the smartest guy in the room at every possible level. So Donald Trump is seeking to succeed a president who is a constitutional scholar, and he's seeking to do so by not being the chairman of the Do Nothing Party, but the executive director of the Know Nothing Party.
That's a good one, yeah. No, I mean, at the end of the day, you're while Bush couldn't get into the University of Texas, but got the legacy into Yale and Harvard. You look at Trump and you go, wow, no, you're right, the Know Nothing man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's shocking about this is that this is a guy who has a degree from the Wharton School, a place with which I have some personal familiarity, right? And Wharton doesn't admit dumb people, so he's worked at dumbing himself down over a period of decades.
And this is where I bring it up. I mean, he really cut his teeth, and I think all of these chops, doing the World Wrestling Federation, and these are the voters, and this is why I think he's done so well. Not The Apprentice. I mean, The Apprentice had some of it, but I think that the wrestling thing by far did more for him than anything else has.
Well, I think that you may be right. I mean, understand that the WWF is the precursor in many important ways of what we now refer to as reality TV. I mean, there's nothing real about it, but it's what we refer to as reality TV. And they, of course, were doing that by inventing these wrestling shows that were not athletic. They were something, but they certainly weren't athletic events. And a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, and a lot of trumped up fights while interviews were going on, and every once in a while they actually had a fixed wrestling match in between multiple interviews and advertisements for the next event and so on. And that's all awfully similar to the reality shows like The Apprentice. I mean, it was just one form of fighting versus another, and one form of phony interviews versus another. And now we have Donald Trump, and and he's not alone in this. I mean, we also have Marco Rubio and his own parallel reality, and we have Ted Cruz and his reality, and then we have the guy originally from Pittsburgh who is now an Ohio governor who keeps on referring back to his roots in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh, Kasich, who has yet another reality. But, it's all quite bizarre until we start to realize that this is a campaign for the presidency of the United States of America. Yep. It ain't a reality show. So we have Trump, who appears to not have a filter with respect to things that come out of his mouth, but clearly has a filter, and it's the filter of the well-rehearsed carnival barker who makes his money as a reality TV player and a sort of a showman, low-level showman, in a show that doesn't have exactly a script, doesn't have exactly producers, it doesn't have exactly writers, it doesn't have exactly directors, it doesn't have professional actors, and oh, by the way, it doesn't have wages and benefits that sustain that industry. But he's doing it, and every new outrageous statement is taken through the filter of the TV show player as opposed to the candidate for presidency of the United States. The guy who's going to have the briefcase with the nuclear codes, yep. The guy who's going to be designating justices of the Supreme Court of the United States, that's going to be choosing judges for the federal bench in every region of the country, the guy that's going to be interacting with other nations, other sovereign countries, and he's going to do this by making faces at them and flipping them off and offering glib quips. This is deadly serious, Rick.
I know.
And this is not a joke. But then we also have Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, who looks like he's probably not old enough to be president of the United States under the constitutional prescription of anybody under age 35 not being eligible. Among other things, you also have to have been native to America, but that's another native-born American citizen. Another story. We'll get back to that, Ted Cruz. But we have Rubio consistently loses and consistently announces in glee and joy and assertiveness that he is the victor. Okay? Comes in second, he won. Comes in third, he won bigger.
Well, I mean, didn't you see Ben Carson came out and said, hey, I got as many votes as everybody else? It's like participation awards. We give them all a trophy.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was having this thought that we've reached a point, and there are arguments on both sides of this, and I'm not about to make a values-based statement, but just an observation. We've reached a point where, because we don't want to hurt or offend or diminish the efforts that any child makes, that every kid on the Little League team, every kid on the soccer team, every kid on the Winter Basketball League team, every kid on the midget football team gets a trophy at the end of the season. And I guess maybe Marco Rubio is young enough that is part of the fixation and part of the milieu in which he grew up. So in his world, coming in third is a win, because he's been trained to think everybody's a winner. Everybody's a winner. So when I saw him this morning being interviewed, and he was asked, among other things, on MSNBC by former Republican Congressman
Scarborough.
Yeah, Joe Scarborough, about why, if Trump was winning, is he spending his efforts attacking Cruz? And he said, "Who's doing that?" and said it with a straight face. And clearly he has a strategy that he becomes the mainstream Republican candidate as long as he can take out Cruz,
right?
Who's anything but mainstream, and maybe not much of a candidate. I don't know. And then we have Cruz, who is compelled in the middle of the Nevada and South Carolina activities of the past week to fire his communications director for manipulating. And this is not the first time we've caught Cruz in such really offensive lying conduct, or manipulating the voiceover and verbiage of a Rubio series of remarks and intentionally mischaracterizing them to the point where Cruz makes somebody else take the fall for conduct that he obviously could have approved or disapproved if he so chose to be that deeply involved in his campaign. So they all have this other thing, except apparently Trump, who says everything himself. They all have this other stuff going on where when they screw up, they have somebody they can blame.
Well, you need someone to fall on the sword. But, at the end of this, while it's fun to watch, and I think you made a point earlier very, very aptly that this is the guy carrying the nuclear football. This is who we're voting for. And while all of these shenanigans may be fun for, evening television, there are deadly serious consequences. And what does the future of this country look like? You look at the policies of the Kasichs and the Walkers and you can go through the Republican governors and go through the candidates who have thrown their name in for this. And it's all, in my view, really ugly stuff, taking us well backward.
Well, this is part of the march to repeal the 20th century. We have Kasich. Kasich was for right to work until he was against right to work. And he was for right to work as long as it passed. But then when the people of Ohio voted and said, we're against it, he became against it. And he is a guy with roots in the steel mills of Pittsburgh, but he beats up on workers on a daily basis. He, in the context of who his opponents are in this primary season, tends to look modestly more rational. But it's only modest, and it's only by comparison. We have had this constant march toward redefining what moderate means, and he is to moderate what I am to nuclear physics. It's just that simple. So we have those issues. But what's happening with the Trump piece is, to me, breathtaking, stunning, and not in a good way, because what we have here is the next level of what happens when the politics of hate and the politics of nasty and politics of ad hominem personal attack become the rule and not the exception. Yeah. And so the Republican Party of the United States of America, in its effort to crush us and destroy us, has opened itself up and reached out to all manner of fringes. And now the fringes are biting them back.
Yeah, the factions are
snack on them.
It's the factions tearing us apart, just like they said in Federalist 10 that would destroy the country. And here's the thing: I look at 2008, and I joked about how crazy the Republicans seemed, and 2012 was manna from heaven, how crazy they were then. This is now scary. This is now scary because I go, okay, let's say we get through this. What does the next election look like? How much worse can things get?
Well, and we're talking about worse in a different way. I think that's an important point that you just made. It's not worse in the sense that it may be policies with which we agree or disagree. It's worse in the sense of the tone and the tenor.
Yeah, the discourse.
There was a time, and it's not that long ago, it's certainly in my lifetime, where there were approaches and things and ways of saying things that were just not acceptable in public discourse generally, and certainly were not acceptable in someone who wanted to hold the office of President of the United States of America. And now there is nothing that is off base. There is nothing that stops the politics of hate, whether it's Ted Cruz saying things like, that's the New York way, and implicit in that is an anti-Semitic attack, or it's Donald Trump with his sexist, misogynistic, and racist overtones in every statement, even the misogynistic statements about a Fox News reporter. And how do we do this? But more importantly, how is this part of the discourse of a campaign for the presidency of my country? It is deadly serious. This is not a joke. And we're no longer in the spot where people can say, let him go. He can't win anyway, and let's have a little fun.
No, I'm afraid he's going to win.
Yeah,
I keep saying this could be a 1980 moment all over again, where the Democrats of the day wanted the fringe Ronald Reagan, and look where we are now, 30 some years later.
Yeah, as a result of it. So, and understand, I know enough about what I see to recognize that the public persona Donald Trump and the private operator Donald are two very different people. But let's deal with what we do know about that private Trump. 4, not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 bankruptcies, hanging banks just the way the bankers hung us, and hanging insurance companies just the way the insurance companies hung us. Failed marriages, multiple failed marriages. This is family values. Bankruptcies are the family value. And his answer, very glibly, is, that's what the law allowed, so I did it. It's not, I have any remorse. I mean, and the best proof of the pudding is, here he is last night in Nevada, the state where his crashes were monumental, and his bankruptcies resulted in huge job losses, and people are coming out and voting for him in this crazy caucus procedure that they have there. And then, of course, he's the winner. Okay? He's the winner with, what did he have, 40,000 votes?
Something like that.
Okay. I ran for the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania 15 years ago, and I got more votes than that in 3 divisions in Philadelphia. And I lost, because I lost. So what is the significance to all of us in the United States that Donald Trump got 40-odd thousand votes yesterday, and that made him the winner? He didn't even get 50% of the vote, by the way. And he's never once in any of these winner things gotten 50% of the vote. So what does that mean other than this is a media circus? People have asked the question or made the assertion that Donald Trump is special because he self-financed his campaign. He hasn't self-financed his campaign. CBS, ABC, NBC, and Fox News have financed his campaign. Yep. MSNBC finances his campaign. They keep on giving him free media, and he keeps on playing them like a Stradivarius violin because he is a media circus. He is not a president of the United States.
No, I'm with you.
And certainly knows his craft.
He certainly does. But one of the things one of the things I did want to ask you about before we go, it's the policy stuff that scares me, and that taking us back, repealing the 21st century. And I wanted to real quick ask you about something that's going on in Wisconsin, as the governor there is in his last budget has come out and is going to destroy the civil service system there. And he wants people to be hired based on their merit. And we hear a lot about the meritocracy and all of that. Evidently, according to him, he wants people to be hired based on their resumes and, quote, the impressions they leave on the administrators. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, first of all, let's understand. The Civil Service Act that was passed in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, actually in virtually the same time, the same year, was really described as the merit hiring law. And civil service laws protect us, taxpayers, and they were created to protect us, taxpayers, from this silliness that he has the colossal gall, that Walker has the colossal gall to suggest has something to do with merit. That is replacing a merit system, because the civil service system at its core is a merit-based system that prohibits public employers from acting arbitrarily in the hire, fire, discipline, discharge, promotion, demotion of public employees, takes the politics out of it, and replaces that system with the yoke of political patronage, pay to play. You do away with civil service, and what you have instead is whoever the Koch brothers say is the person you should hire, Scott Walker, is the one who gets hired. And whatever the Koch brothers say is the person who gets promoted is the person who gets promoted. And whatever the Koch brothers say, or your political financiers say, is that person who doesn't show up for work, comes in late, leaves early, is supposed to nonetheless remain on the payroll. I recall a time when I was a child, and I didn't understand it as a child, but I grew to understand it as an adult and an advocate on behalf of working men and women, of when we used to have here in Pennsylvania the ward system. So if you wanted to be a teacher in a public school, you not only had to go to college, you not only had to get a degree, you not only had to be certified, but you also had to have your local political ward leader of whatever political party was in control agree that you were allowed to have a job to teach and educate our children. We changed that. That's what civil service has accomplished. That's what unionization has accomplished in the public sector, getting people out from under the yoke of political patronage and pay to play. So Scott Walker coming forth now with this proposal as if it's new to eliminate civil service, to assault and attack public employees yet again, and replace civil service with what he decides is merit, because merit, of course, is subjective. It's not objective. Merit does not have anything like due process, like notice and an opportunity to be heard if you're to be disciplined, like just and sufficient cause if you're to be fired or demoted, like reasonable basis to pass over the next person that's entitled to the promotion because of true merit-based issues, as opposed to who their political sponsors may be. This is a throwback. This is nothing new. This is nothing novel. This is part of the repeal of the 20th century. This is, let's go back to the good old days of Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed. We can do this. This is, go back to the days of before Dick Dilworth became the mayor of Philadelphia, and we had an old Republican machine that hired and fired people based on who worked in the elections for the people who won. We get this. We understand this, and we need to reveal this.
See, we've seen the movie.
Yeah.
And again, nothing good here. But not surprising to me that this is the direction Walker would go given his past.
Yeah, well, it's not even that we've seen the movie. We read the Cliff Notes and understand all we need to know from that.
Sad stuff. But to me, this is what I think we could expect from anyone, Trump on down on the Republican side. So not surprising to me. Erwin, always great having you on the program. Thanks for taking some time for us, man.
Good to be here. Talk to you next week. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. What do you think? T-Rump in the White House? Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour. This is a Radio Labor special report recorded on Wednesday, February 24th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. International labor organizations are condemning a decision by the Iranian government to sentence a leading teacher unionist to 6 years in prison. Ismail Abdi, a leader of the Tehran branch of the Iranian Teachers Trade Association, has been convicted for alleged crimes related to trade union activism. Last summer, Mr. Abdi tried to get a visa to attend the Congress of Education International in Ottawa. To get the visa, he had to go to Albania because Canada does not have an embassy in Iran. He was turned back at the border and told to argue his case with officers at the infamous Evin prison. There, he was arrested, and now he has been given a long prison sentence for his labor union work. Education International is the global union federation which represents teachers and other education workers. EI General Secretary Fred Van Leeuwen told the media Mr. Abdi's detention represents infringements of various international human rights conventions, including those protecting the freedom of expression and association. To better understand the plight of teachers in Iran, I talked to Akbar Zareen. Mr. Zareen is a union leader in Isfahan, the country's third largest city. We spoke through an interpreter. I asked him to describe how the government of Iran is treating its teachers.
The government is not really trying to allow us to improve our education. They're trying to keep the level of the education at the level that was about 35 years ago. They don't want the students to be educated with new material. We have to keep on providing the same and exact information that we were giving the students 25 years ago. And they try to show or have this kind of a implication inside the society that the teachers are asking for too much and they don't deserve any more. And this is at a time that he's saying all the other employees in different sectors and stuff, they get, beside their salaries, they get a really good bonuses, not only, to help out with their other expenses like books or for their insurance or any other things. They don't get anything. They even allow workers at the factories like the steel factory of the Isfahan, which is a very well-known factory, to have bonuses to allow allowance to get their books and stuff. But they don't allow teachers to have books.
You say that the government is trying to influence how Iranians think about themselves and their society by not supporting education. How is it doing that?
The problem that we have in Iran is because the Ministry of Education has tried to differentiate the human science subjects in Iran than what exactly it is. Because like any other subjects like math or the ones that are very clear that 2 times 2 is 4, they cannot change those as much. But their hands are wide open to changing the meaning of the human sciences. They are trying to replace the human science courses with the religious courses and only have human science courses in schools that are designated as art school or universities.
Interpreter services for this interview were provided by Hamid Garaji, a longtime activist with the International Alliance in Support of Workers in Iran. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Bringing sanity and rationality Rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Irwin hits on really an interesting point in my view. That discourse. I mean, I remember a time where you could sit down to lunch, you could sit down and you could have a conversation with someone that you didn't agree with. And you could debate the idea, you go back and forth, and you could walk away, shake hands, and go, I don't agree, but hey, you made an interesting point, and you'd walk away. Now it seems that if we don't agree, we just shout at each other. Nobody actually listens to the other side, and then both people walk away slamming doors on each side, which is why I think we have seen the mass polarization. And I think we're seeing that on college campuses. We're seeing that in workplaces. We're seeing that all across this country. And what's interesting to me is it's that discourse that I think we need to have that kind of breaks down some of that barrier, just kind of a thought. And to me, education is that place. So when I saw this tweet go out this morning, and I've reached out to the guy who tweeted it out to try and get him to come on to the program, a PhD candidate at the University of Houston. He evidently was in, because I guess he's one of the professors, the teaching assistants, one of the adjuncts, one of the people who are doing some work there. Evidently, they had a little get together for the staff because the University of Texas, or the University of Houston, they have decided that they will allow all students to carry concealed weapons in the classroom. And the teacher cannot, under threat of a $10,000 fine, cannot say anyone can't carry a gun in the classroom. So the University of Houston held this seminar saying, look, this is the law. There's nothing we can do about it. So now we've got to be talking about how we make sure we keep our professors and other students safe. So the slide on the wall that this guy tweeted out said, be careful of discussing sensitive topics. Anything that someone might disagree with, drop certain topics from your curriculum. Another one was not, quote, go there if you sense anger, and limit student access off hours. Think about this for a second, because I saw this slide and I hadn't read anything else about it. I just saw the slide and I'm going, that is horribly destructive to our ability to have conversations, to educate the next generation, and to really deal with and grapple with complex problems and situations. And I got to be honest, if at the university level, Samantha, at the university level, if you cannot have a heated discussion out of fear that someone is going to shoot you, I really worry for the health and safety and life of our democracy.
Well, this just flies in the face of academic freedom. I think this is, we used to think that tenure was the thing that kept people, teachers protected when it came to controversial research and opinions. But now I guess, that flew out the window and we can just shoot people if we don't like it.
Maybe that's it. Maybe no more tenure. Just give them a gun.
This is definitely one way to quell, a little bit of radical speech, or, just asking different questions, asking people to think, because that's the whole point of education at this point. At the higher level, in higher ed, it's about getting people to think, asking questions, teaching people how to ask questions. This is the important stuff.
Asking teachers and education, to ask the tough questions and to be able to grapple with big problems. No, we just love the uneducated people.
This is sad.
Nice, beautiful stuff, though, I got to tell you, but scary to me. Which brings me to the article I saw over at Alternet. A guy named Aaron Williams was interviewing Noam Chomsky, and he asked the question, what are your opinions on the surprising progress of Donald Trump? He says, could it be explained by a climate of fear? And Chomsky's response was fear, along with the breakdown of society during that neoliberal period. He said people feel isolated, helpless, victim of powerful forces that they do not understand and that cannot influence. He says it's interesting to compare the situation of today to that of the 1930s, which he says he's not old enough to remember. He says, but objectively, poverty and suffering were far greater then. But even among the working poor, he said, and the unemployed, there was a sense of hope because you had a militant labor movement. You had people who were talking about how do we make the world better, as opposed to what we see today of how do we destroy, how do we tear down, how do we take from others, which is really kind of an interesting look at things.
Yeah, I mean, well, they viewed the future as being able to build progress. And we are looking at a past where progress has been dismantled. And I think you're right as far as they had a far more hopeful outlook in the 30s, which is sad to say. The Great Depression, decimated,
because they were thinking
people
forward for their kids. But, I watched Trump last night give his speech, and immediately, I'm thinking of Ronald Reagan. Because there are a lot of parallels. There's the crazy guy who's out on the fringe and everyone's going, hey, he's the guy. And it immediately brought me back to a quote that Reagan was very famous for having said about liberals that I think really, honestly, today looking at conservatives is spot on, which is, it isn't so much that they're ignorant. It's just that there are so many things that aren't so. And you look at the conservatives, you look at what they're saying, and so much of what they are saying is not so, even if there are a lot of things they say that I think is ignorant too.
Well, yeah. Well, it comes back to discourse. It comes back to discourse as opposed to, your success now is not about raising the level of your argument, but raising the level of your volume. And that...
What?
That was not nice. That was not nice. That wasn't nice at all. See, this is exactly...
See how it works? See, I stopped you. I won. I was louder.
I am the one who pointed this out, and I get punished for it. See, I guess that makes sense.
No, but I'm just highlighting your point. You're right. I've had those conversations with people where your volume has to go up to be heard. And the reality is you can scream as much as you want. You're still not being heard because the other person's screaming at you.
Yeah. I mean, reaching a consensus and being able to understand someone is almost looked down upon now. You're weak in your ideology if you are able to see the other side. Your ideology is considered weak if you can see it from the other side, and that should not. If you are so protective of your ideology and your beliefs, then maybe you kind of subconsciously know that there's a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, the argument should be had. I mean, we should be talking about things. But at the end of the day, I go back to so much that isn't. And I had a listener send me this article written by this guy named Dustin Howard, who is a millennial. He says he's a millennial. And he talks about, how his family came from being a very blue-collar, working-class family to being an ultra right-wing conservative. And he's very upfront and honest about exactly how it happened. They went through the Clinton years, and it was all of the attacks on the Clintons, all the attacks on government, all of just the constant minutia of the scandal and all of that stuff that made them the values voters. And then 9/11 completely flipped them because of the fear and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But the main part of this kid's argument is that it wasn't until, his father got him Sirius XM, where he starts listening to morning to night Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, all down the list of these right-wing crazies who are now giving him the world view. And this is what exactly the Trump revolution, if you will say, is about. It's about the culmination of the entertainment, infotainment stuff really taking to people's core and them now supporting the craziest person they can find.
It's this ultimate media monoculture that people end up living in. They get their news from one source. They hear their opinion told to them, what they should believe and what they should think from one source, because the money is there. The money is there to make sure that that discourse and that message is heard 24 hours a day on multiple channels and multiple media streams. And most people aren't educated to the point where they can ask the question, where they know what asking a question looks like. And I don't know. It's frustrating because it's a perpetuating cycle, a self-perpetuating cycle of
But it comes back to me to that 9/11 moment. a lot of this. And this kid writes, and I think aptly, and I don't think he meant to write this as he did, but he said suddenly the president that was barely better than Al Gore became someone special to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was that moment that you go, now we're looking for the father figure. As Irwin said, he was barely a C student. Who knows where he was during his military years? Was he coked out somewhere? Who knows?
Well,
I'm not saying one way or another. Was he? We don't know. But there were a lot of questions. But now this guy who was basically just on the coattails of his father got everything he got because, hey, he was born. He picked the right door to be born out of. And now he's in this position that I argue if Gore's president doesn't happen, 9/11 in my view doesn't happen because someone's actually paying attention.
Yeah.
And now he's special to a generation of blue collar workers who just want to feel like someone is going to have their back in a street fight. And I've been saying this for years. The uneducated, the blue collar worker, the guy who's out there busting his behind to try and keep food on the table, he respects that kind of strength. Even if you're wrong, he respects that kind of brute strength, someone who you want to have a beer with, someone who you want to have your back in a street fight, even if you're going in the wrong direction, as long as you're the decider guy. And all of the things I thought Bush did well to target the white working class voter, Trump is doing as well.
Well, it's playing off of fear. This is historically the cycle of discourse. It's one of the negative downsides of this is that fear and oppression, they take over eventually, and they dictate who is heard and what message gets out there. And that's very important. That's very important. And that moment in time was capitalized upon. It was most certainly capitalized upon by many media figures and many political figures at that time because he was not going to be a second-term president at that point. Everybody knew that. He had just slid down in the 9 months that he had that office or 8 months or whatever at that point. And he was able to play it in a particular way. He became a wartime president. We don't get rid of wartime presidents.
No. Had to keep that. And, now going back to Reagan, this kid also in this piece, hits on another thing. And he's thankful to President Reagan for for doing away with the fairness doctrine. He's thankful for that. And I guess it shows that my team win mentality. Even if I agreed with what they say, I would want to hear another side because occasionally I do listen to right-wing talk radio. Occasionally I do listen to some other left-wing stuff. Occasionally because I want to hear what people are thinking and saying, and I want to read. I actually read more of the right-wing stuff than I do of the left-wing stuff because I want to know what's going on the other side.
Yeah.
We don't do that anymore as a society, and I think Chomsky hit on that as well. That's the scary stuff.
Well, think about it, though. We have to choose our news sources as either being right-wing or left-wing. But in reality, it should be... No, I'm not.
I don't believe you can have an unbiased media. I don't believe that someone can be completely unbiased. I want you to tell me what your bias is. I want to know what your argument is. This way you can weigh both of them. I don't think that the Walter Cronkite era was all we thought it was to be.
Well, no one's saying that it's ever going to be unbiased, but there is something about having fact in your actual argument here, in your actual story. There's this idea of what news is. And news today is not news. It is not here's what's happening. Here is what the reality is and the facts of the matter. No, it's here's what I think about this thing. Here's what I think. This is what I see. It's very subjective. And I mean, that's, exactly. We're not listening to the BBC. We're not listening to NPR. We're not listening to AP. We're listening to Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, which is, really more entertainment TV than anything else most of the time.
Yeah. Again, it's something with that we're certainly going to have to deal with as a society. But again, the Trump, wow, I'm afraid. And I think we should be when we love the uneducated. Wow. Quick break. Right back.
In the USA, you're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For WIN, I'm Joanne Powers. Economic Policy Institute senior economic analyst Dave Cooper says raising the federal minimum wage to $12 an hour would save American taxpayers $17 billion in public assistance spending. That because many corporations pay workers so little they qualify for public assistance programs.
The point is that if we want low-income families to be able to have a decent life, we need to take a closer look at what they're being paid and what we're expecting of businesses. Big corporations are achieving extraordinary profits at the same time that their workers are relying on food stamps.
Cooper says huge tax savings are possible through raising wages.
Well, there are many things we could do to lift wages, but the most straightforward is to raise the minimum wage. Increasing the federal minimum wage to $12 by 2020 would lift wages for over 35 million workers nationwide and generate about $17 billion in savings to government assistance programs. That $17 billion could then be used to make our anti-poverty program stronger or make long overdue investments in education or public infrastructure.
The Chicago Teachers Union says privatized nursing services are driving Chicago schools to the brink of a health crisis. A report called Nursing Services at CPS says an epidemic of outsourced nursing services is affecting the health of 400,000 students throughout the Chicago School District. The union will present its findings to the school board Wednesday. The Chicago Teachers Union says RCM Technologies got a $30 million contract from the school district in 2015, but the union says the company is failing to meet its obligations. Some school nurses are reporting stories of RCM staff untrained to deliver basic tasks and a high turnover rate for outsourced nurses. The union says this outsourcing of nurses is designed to ultimately eliminate union nursing jobs, replacing them with temporary nurses with no job protection or employment benefits. Teamsters workers Tuesday protested the $10.3 billion purchase of Airgas by the French company Air Liquide. Bringing their protest to the Houston headquarters of Airgas, the workers demanded that Air Liquide stop its attacks on workers and their unions. Teamsters General Secretary-Treasurer Ken Hall says Air Liquide and Airgas have been conducting a campaign of wage discrimination, threatening workers with loss of health care, benefits, and wages during collective bargaining, and attempts at union busting by threatening union activists. The Teamsters say the company would never get away with treating its French workers this way.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender, offering a wide range of treasury management services designed to control cost, improve cash flow, and simplify accounting for unions. Online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Prevailing wage was actually discriminatory when it started. I don't think we need to go into the full history of that, but it was definitely meant to keep construction projects local, and we are now in pretty much of a global economy.
Yes, Chairman Miller. It's all discriminatory, those prevailing wages that we hate so much. And look, there's a move not just here in Pennsylvania, but all across the country to undo the prevailing wage laws. And I've been saying for a very long time, dumb idea, ridiculous idea. Maybe look at a whole bunch of other things that have padded, the architect's pockets. Maybe look at some of the other things that we do instead of screwing the workforce. But it's easier to go after the workers. It's easier to do that. And which is why when I came across this report on the prevailing wage, I understand the first of its kind to look at what would happen if all the states decided to dump it. According to this report and to the people who had done it, 400,000 jobs could be lost, $65 billion from our national economy gone, tax revenue, about $8 billion eliminated as well. Bad stuff. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the report. He is one of the co-authors, also a researcher with Smart Cities Prevail. Alex Langston, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I look at this, and just to start off, we've got the chairman of the House Labor Committee here saying, hey, it's discriminatory. Those prevailing wages are bad because they discriminate. Ludicrous, I think.
Well, it is ludicrous. I mean, we could say it discriminates against low-road employers, and encourages the construction industry to be more productive, to be more safe, to be more inclusive, and ultimately to return benefits back to their local communities. So, if that's the sort of discrimination he means, then I think it's probably something that a lot of people would look forward to. But back on history, this has been an ongoing claim that prevailing wages are intended to discriminate against minorities, people of color, and other groups of women. And the fact is, it's just not true. There's been a fair amount of history research on that, and I'm not going to get into it. But the practical effect today, what we see today in how prevailing wage laws work, is that they really enable more disadvantaged folks to get into sustainable construction careers and be able to maintain dignified working lives, and be able to support their families, get health care, be able to provide for their eventual retirement. We find that it improves training, it improves safety, and ultimately it improves outcomes for the lowest earning individuals in the construction industry, and reduces their reliance on public support programs.
Right. So let me ask you this. I look at this quote by one of the co-authors of the report, this Kevin Duncan, who says, look, if all the states got rid of the laws and you repealed them, 400,000 jobs lost, $65 billion in national economy money lost, $8 billion in tax. Where does that come from? How do you come up with that? Walk me through it.
Sure. So what we did with this study is we basically took a look at what would happen if you reshuffled the spending of the construction industry. What the overwhelming body of prevailing wage research has shown is that they do not impact construction costs. So operating from that sort of central understanding, we took a look. We broke the nation down into two groups of states: those with strong and I guess average strength prevailing wage laws, and those with no prevailing wage laws at the state level, or just very weak prevailing wage laws at the state level. What everybody obviously is covered by is the federal Davis-Bacon Act, the national prevailing wage law. So really the main difference between those two states in terms of their construction industry is that particular policy measure, as we found. And what we found was that states without prevailing wage laws, unsurprisingly, spend less on their people. They spend less in direct wages and salaries and wages, and they also spend less in benefits and earned benefits such as health care and retirement. But where almost all of that money ends up going is materials. They're less efficient. They waste more, and they produce less per worker.
See, but Alex, what I keep hearing here, and we've got the Commonwealth Foundation, one of the right-wing tinky tanks here, who says that, if we just did away with this one little thing, just got rid of this prevailing wage law, we could save 30% on all of our building. When we build a school, it'd be 30% cheaper. The taxpayers would make out. Everybody would be happy. It would be 30% savings. Who could be against that?
I imagine you and a number of your listeners, if not all of your listeners, will remember President Clinton's address at the Democratic Convention. I think it was in 2012. And he went at length about arithmetic. Well, the arithmetic is that workers, direct construction labor, and benefits makes up about a quarter of your construction dollar, hard construction dollar. That means that 25 cents of every dollar goes back to workers or the benefits for their wages. That means that anybody claiming that you're going to save 30% on your construction costs by cutting the wages of by cutting a line item that amounts to a quarter of your total cost, of your total production cost, by let's say even 25%, it means that they don't know how to add or they don't know how to multiply.
Either that or they're hoping that the workers will pay them back for the privilege of building the project.
Well, maybe that is what they are hoping. I mean, there is that tendency in among some of those folks as well.
Little hopeful. I mean, but at the end of this, and this is where I've had conversations with some of my small business owning friends who have bought into this line that, well, they make too much. And I remind them that the wages that these construction workers earn are is the money that they spend in their stores and in their businesses. So that money that we're paying construction workers to do good quality work, local, to make sure we get the best for our buck, it does reverberate through our economy and create other jobs, I think.
Absolutely. And that's actually the second part of, I guess, continuing the explanation that I was trying to get into when you asked how this happens. So we break the states down into two groups, and we see that non-prevailing wage states end up spending a lot more on materials and a lot less on people. And how that actually ends up playing itself out is that some of the money ends up just simply leaving those local economies. It doesn't get spent, doesn't have the economic impact. But more substantively, when workers have less to spend, they spend less. And when they spend less, if you are a small business owner, if you're any sort of business owner, that means they're going to spend less with you. And when they spend less with you, that means you make less. It's really not all that a complicated situation. When the people you count on to spend money in your store don't have money, they don't spend money in your store. And when people don't spend money in your store, you don't make money.
That's it. And I've had those conversations with friends, and I've actually seen it happen. I mean, we had a factory here that wanted their workforce to take a 50% pay cut. And I remember a friend who had a small diner saying, well, they make too much anyway. I go, but yeah, understand that was your money that they're losing. And within 6 months after the closing of the plant, he ended up losing the restaurant. And really, not gleefully, I did remind him that was his money.
Yeah, and so that's one. And and this is something that I think is, Rick, I guess you're in Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure how broad an area you cover, but I think Pennsylvania, Upper Midwest, is really has seen what happens. Writ large, has seen what happens when local economies are disrupted or when people's incomes are dramatically reduced. And one of the analogies that I like to use is that we often hear a lot, especially in the Rust Belt, about the damage that outsourcing and offshoring has done to these communities. Well, in many ways, eliminating prevailing wage is doing the same exact thing to your construction community. Because essentially what you're doing is you're saying is you contractor who may have significantly lower labor standards, who doesn't support safety, doesn't invest in training his workforce and invest in productivity, you can come in, win the job to build our public works, to build our schools, to fix our roads, to repair our bridges. You can bring in your workers from wherever. You can pay them whatever makes sense, maybe where they live, and then you can leave. And at the end of the day, you end up sort of with the same situation as when a factory closed because its owner decided that he could make more money by setting up shop in Tijuana or in Shenzhen, and that you suck the lifeblood, the economic lifeblood out of communities. And I know very few people who want to see their own communities fail because people simply don't have the resources that they need to support all the things that we love about our communities, whether it's the local stores or even have the time, to make a decent enough living to be able to have the time to participate in their communities.
Yeah, that's important. No, that's important as well. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Alex Langston. He is the researcher over at the group Smart cities prevail. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com of how you can check out this new study. Read it for yourself. Let me ask you this. I mean, in looking at this, the states that have done away with prevailing wage laws, I'm curious what happened to their construction industry. Did we see it go away? Did we see transient labor come through? What was the dynamic once that happened?
Well, we're going to be, right now we have really a natural experiment happening in Wisconsin. It's going to take a few years for that to play itself out. But in prior years, this has happened in other states. And when the dust settled and the research was done, what they found was construction costs did not decline any more than they declined in other states. Often it happened, when you're doing economics, you have to watch to see what other conditions are happening. So I think the one I recall most vividly is the story of Michigan, which repealed its prevailing wage because of constitutional provision a number of years ago. I think it was in the 80s or something like that, and then it came back. And what researchers found was construction costs didn't decline. Training certainly did. Wages did.
But the costs didn't.
Investment in safety did. But actual construction costs per unit didn't decline any more than they did in other parts of the country where prevailing wages were not in play. And we see this consistently. I mean, that's why 75% of all peer-reviewed research shows that there's no cost effect. It's not there.
Yeah, I look at when Pennsylvania did it for a very short period of time during the Ridge administration. They actually had to go back and rebid everything because the bids actually came in higher without the prevailing wage than it did. It was a weird thing.
Well, and part of the reason that happens, and this is something that it took talking to contractors to figure out why it was going on, is you have when you have prevailing wages on a project, it basically says everybody is competing. It organizes the competition. It anchors the competitive process. I mean, when you do public works, it's always low bid. It's lowest responsible and responsive bidder. So it anchors the entire competitive process around productivity, how well you can manage your job, because everybody's paying the same for their labor on an hourly basis, and everybody's paying pretty much the same for their materials. So really, where you make your where you win the job is being able to get it done 3 days faster and saving that penny because you didn't have to work those extra 3 days.
No, it's being more productive.
Exactly.
Being more efficient. It's having a better logistic operation. It's all the things that I think, Alex, where we should be competing on, not cutthroat wages.
Exactly. So, but when you take away the prevailing wage, well, all of a sudden contractors are in there. It's like they no longer have to compete on productivity. They can, some of which can decide, it's like, oh, I can put this bid in. It's like, hey, maybe I can get in under there if I just take a couple of points off on the wages, a couple bucks off on the wages.
Yeah.
Well, what happens is that union contractors, ones who are contractually bound to pay their workers, whether they do it on public works or whether they do it on private jobs, they just don't bother competing. I mean, they don't bother bidding. Bidding costs money, and if you know that you're going to get undercut by some lowball, low road contractor who has absolutely no obligation to maintain the integrity of their workforce and maintain high productivity, you're not going to spend the money to do it.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Last question I've got for you. In looking at this, in states that have done this repeal, how have they been on other things? I mean, for instance, food stamps programs, workforce development programs, programs for veterans, minorities. How have they responded to those issues? Do you find any correlation? Do you find anything that brings those somewhere together?
Well, we didn't look at that particularly in this report, but we did look at, and our third co-author, Frank Manzo, the fourth from the Illinois Economic Policy Institute, did a bunch of statistical work to try to figure out exactly what it would mean to workers if prevailing wage was repealed. And using a variety of different statistical techniques, what he found was you're actually going to see less investment in apprenticeship. You're going to see more use of public safety net programs. You're going to see more food stamp use. You're going to see more people qualify for Medicaid and for the Earned Income Tax Credit. And when you think not really difficult to figure out why. People are earning less. People are earning less. Construction, for all you think it may be, highly compensated work, when you take a look at the hourly rate, construction workers really don't make all that much money. They don't work year round. It's a cyclical business. There are some years are great, some years are far worse. For example, in California, after the economy collapsed, after the Wall Street tanked the economy, what we found was that for carpenters, example, you saw in Northern California, you saw carpenter employment, overall employment, drop by 60%.
Wow.
I mean, these are huge numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, just absolutely huge. And similarly, it's cyclical, and people work maybe 1,700 hours a year, and in cold weather states, they may work less.
Yeah. And what you do here in Pennsylvania is you punish them for being in the industry by screwing them over on their unemployment. But that's a discussion for an entire another day. The report, The Economic, Fiscal, and Social Impacts of State Prevailing Wage Laws. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can take a look at it. I suggest that you do. Alex, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As we continue to talk about this, we'd love to have you back and share a bit more, if you would.
Please do. Please do. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and good luck with everything in Pennsylvania.
Great talking with you. Thanks so much, Alex Landsberg. He is a researcher with Smart Cities Prevail. We've got a link to their site as well if you want to take a look at the great work that they do. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. The U.S. Congress passed the child labor tax law. At the turn of the 20th century, child labor had increasingly become an issue of concern in the United States. In 1890, the census found more than 1 million children between the ages of 10 and 15 in the workforce. By 1910, that number had exceeded 2 million working children. Many of these children worked long hours in unhealthy conditions for low wages. Progressive activists led campaigns to bring national attention to the plight of these working children. As a result, many individual states passed limits on children's work. Nationally, there was no uniform legislation. Southern lawmakers were unwilling to push for child protections because local factory owners insisted child labor was necessary if Southern businesses were going to compete with manufacturers in the North. The state laws that did exist were poorly enforced, especially in Southern states. In 1909, a survey of South Carolina mills found that nearly 92% of them were violating what little child labor regulations were in place. In 1916, the U.S. Congress attempted to regulate child labor, but a federal judge ruled that legislation unconstitutional. Undeterred, Congress tried again in 1919. They passed a law that said companies in certain industries would face a 10% tax on their profits for hiring child labor. The act defined child labor as any worker under the age of 16 in any mine or quarry and under the age of 14 in any mill, cannery, workshop, factory, or manufacturing establishment. Within a few years, the Supreme Court found that law unconstitutional. In an 8-1 decision, the court ruled that Congress could not use taxes to enforce regulatory power. Although it was only in effect briefly, the child labor tax law did cause a downturn in the use of child labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the events of February 26, 1993, an important but sometimes forgotten date in our history. 6 months prior to that date, Ramzi Yousef, a jihadist well-trained in explosives, flew from Pakistan to JFK International Airport in New York. He was traveling with a companion, but they did not sit together or interact. The companion tried to enter with a forged Swedish passport, but officials noticed it had alterations, did an in-depth search of his luggage, and found a manual on bomb making. He was arrested on the spot. However, Yousef entered with a false Iraqi passport, claiming political asylum, and was allowed in and given a hearing date for the asylum. Yusuf soon pulled together a small group of conspirators to help him acquire materials for a large homemade bomb. Join us again next time for a big blast. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me, I agree. You'll never get bored with winning. We never get bored. We are going to turn this country around. We are going to start winning big league.
We're going to win bigly. And the best way to do that is to screw the workers out of their wages. And what's interesting is the National Labor Relations Board has allowed the charge against Trump and the Trump hotels to go forward as the workers there in Las Vegas are attempting to organize, and good for them. And look, at the end of the day, in talking about prevailing wage, pretty simple stuff. If you're not paying people a living wage, these are folks who are skilled craftspeople who have talents to go somewhere else. And in the states that have done this, what you have seen is you have seen them leave the industry, as you've seen here in Pennsylvania. Because of our insane changes to unemployment, we've seen a lot of skilled craftspeople leave the construction industry. And they've gone on to do other jobs, which, again, causes us to have lower productivity, lower efficiency, and then, obviously, higher costs. Now, you get those people who say, well, if we could save 30%, and I think Alex hit it on the head. Labor costs are about a quarter of a project, about a quarter. Even if you were able to get the 100% of their wages cut aside, you're only saving 25%. You want to talk about the building costs. You want to talk about the architectural fees. You want to talk about a lot of the things that go into that. We can have those conversations. But stealing from workers, to me, is a bad idea, and creating an environment for a transient workforce. And this is where maybe Miller is right. It's about keeping projects local, because I want the guy who put the roof on my kid's school, I want his kid sitting next to mine. Because if the roof falls in, it's his kid too. The transient who just goes on to the next job, trust me, very, very shoddy work indeed. And during the break, Samantha, you had asked about prevailing wage a little bit. And it's an interesting question. On the federal level, it's kind of an average. They take, the average of what the wage is, what's reported, and they come up with a prevailing wage for that area. They choose a geographical area, and with the wage that's paid in that area, that's where it goes. Here in Pennsylvania, it's different. It's a true prevailing wage. Mm-hmm. And the best way to explain it is if you have a parking lot with 10 cars in it, and 6 of them are blue, the prevailing color is obviously blue. Okay. And those are only the people that report. And this is where the right wing kind of just dumb.
Yeah.
If the anti-union contractors were to report the wages of what they pay their workers, that conceivably could be the prevailing wage.
Yeah.
If more people reporting, but here's the problem. You get these contractors who are paying $10, $12 an hour, maybe. They don't want the transparency of knowing what they're actually paying. They don't want their laborers to know how badly they're getting cheated. Mm-hmm. And from what I'm told, the construction industry, especially in the non-union part of it, where there are no contractors, where there are no contracts, one of the largest areas for wage theft in the country.
Yeah, I can see that.
So when you look at this prevailing wage, I want to know that the contractor that's putting the roof on my kid's school is qualified. I want to know that just not somebody who goes, hey, I'm going to put a roof on today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know that the electrician is skilled and has training, and that a contractor vetted this person because they're paying them a sufficient wage.
Yeah.
I don't want someone who just goes, oh, I was flipping burgers yesterday. Let me wire that.
Well, you want someone who has made this their profession. This isn't just the next job that they got to get them to the next one. This is not something they're moonlighting at. This is their profession, which they take seriously and want to develop and get better at, you know.
And out of that then comes the ability to have a sufficient wage to create, as you've said, a perpetual training program through the apprenticeship programs and the continuing education programs that many of the unions have. And this is it's a partnership with the unions and the contractors, because they both have, very similar interests in mind, which is, getting the job and doing the best they can and making some profit off of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can get really hung up in numbers and in this idea of, we're saving 30%, but you're not looking at what that 30% actually is, if it even exists, which apparently it does not.
No, it can't exist.
It can't exist.
But even if you stole
it's an imaginary 30%.
Even if you stole 30% in the wages from the workers,
yeah,
which they never make that distinction, and that's what they're really saying. We want to take 30% pay cut. Want the workers to take a 30% pay cut so we can pocket it. But understand that 30%, and this is where I think this study goes into that. That 30% that they want to steal from that guy's pocket is what funded the local diner, the local the corner store, the local grocery store, the electric company, all of this stuff. That's where people pay their bills out of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you do not have enough money in your pocket to make those bills, if you don't have enough money in your pocket to actually buy the things that you need, then the businesses that are supplying them will fail because of a lack of demand. I mean, that should also be simple numbers here to look at.
Now, the other side of this is, and it's always been my view, instead of denying somebody else a decent wage, I always ask, how do I get it? How do we make sure we all do well?
Yeah.
Instead of attempting to tear from someone else. But again, that comes to that right-wing jealousy that we have. They talk about being exceptional. We're exceptional at stealing from other people, I guess.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently.
But that's it. And to me, the study, nothing new there. But on paper, exactly what is, and I highly suggest folks taking a look at it. Go over to thericksmithshow.com and click on Alex Landsberg's name. Take you right there to the report. We'll take a quick break. When we come back and talk about the budget here in Pennsylvania, what's going on? Is the governor spendthrift, or do we really have a problem? Right back. Stick around.
And the fly in the ointment's gonna bring the whole thing down. The floodgates are open. We've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken. Falling for the ruse.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Wednesday, February 24th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. International labor organizations are condemning a decision by the Iranian government to sentence a leading teacher unionist to 6 years in prison. Ismail Abdi, a leader of the Tehran branch of the Iranian Teachers Trade Association, has been convicted for alleged crimes related to trade union activism. Last summer, Mr. Abdi tried to get a visa to attend the Congress of Education International in Ottawa. To get the visa, he had to go to Albania because Canada does not have an embassy in Iran. He was turned back at the border and told to argue his case with officers at the infamous Evin prison. There, he was arrested, and now he has been given a long prison sentence for his labor union work. Education International is the global union federation which represents teachers and other education workers. EI General Secretary Fred Van Leeuwen told the media Mr. Abdi's detention represents infringements of various international human rights conventions, including those protecting the freedom of expression and association. To better understand the plight of teachers in Iran, I talked to Akbar Zareen. Mr. Zareen is a union leader in Isfahan, the country's third largest city. We spoke through an interpreter. I asked him to describe how the government of Iran is treating its teachers.
The government is not really trying to allow us to improve our education. They're trying to keep the level of the education at the level that was about 35 years ago. They don't want the students to be educated with new material. We have to keep on providing the same and exact information that we were giving the students 25 years ago. And they try to show or have this kind of a implication inside the society that the teachers are asking for too much and they don't deserve any more. And this is at a time that he's saying all the other employees in different sectors and stuff, they get, beside their salaries, they get a really good bonuses, not only, to help out with their other expenses like books or for their insurance or any other things. They don't get anything. They even allow workers at the factories like the steel factory of the Isfahan, which is a very well-known factory, to have bonuses to allowance to get their books and stuff. But they don't allow teachers to have books.
You say that the government is trying to influence how Iranians think about themselves and their society by not supporting education. How is it doing that?
The problem that we have in Iran is because the Ministry of Education has tried to differentiate the human science subjects in Iran than what exactly it is. Because like any other subjects like math or the ones that are very clear that 2 times 2 is 4, they cannot change those as much. But their hands are wide open to changing the meaning of the human sciences. They are trying to replace the human science courses with the religious courses and only have human science courses in schools that are designated as art school or universities.
Interpreter services for this interview were provided by Hamid Garaji, a longtime activist with the International Alliance in Support of Workers in Iran. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So again, we wish the governor nothing but the best as the announcement today came out, prostate cancer. And as he said, look, this isn't going to stop me from doing my job. I'm going to be able to serve the people of Pennsylvania, going to do the job. Now, what I find interesting is on the very day that comes out, the Tribune Review out in Pittsburgh comes out with their editorial board piece saying that the governor should be hauled in front of the legislature by the Capitol Police because he's spendthrift, he's out of control. They said that the legislature has given him $23.4 billion, but Wolf has spent $37.5 billion. He's on a spending spree. Which again, I gotta question those numbers. But the reality is we have a problem, and the question is do we have decisions by default, as is the GOP playbook? Budgeting by crisis, or are we going to actually solve our problems? Here to talk a little bit about the budget, I've asked our good friend John Neurohr. He is Communications Director over at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. John, thanks for taking time for us.
It's always good to talk to you, Rick. And I just want to echo, before we get into this, I want to echo your sentiments there. Our thoughts are definitely with Governor Wolf and his family. So it's never easy, but it sounds like they caught it early, which is good. Our best to him and his family as well during a tough time, but it sounds like hopefully things are going to be just fine.
Yeah, and as he said in his email to everyone, the reality is he didn't just get lucky. It was found because he does a yearly screening. He has doctors that he has in constant care with, and it just wasn't, oh, look what we found. It was they were looking to make sure, because he's of the age where it's possible, and this is what preventative health care looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just going to say, not to get on a tangent, but yeah, that definitely is proof of the importance of preventative care, and which is obviously an emphasis of the Affordable Care Act, providing that preventative care for all Americans. Absolutely, yes. It's more than just being lucky. It's being smart.
So let's get to it. Is the governor spendthrift? Has he spent $37.5 billion on this latest spree?
Yeah, I think your point before about questioning those numbers is very valid. But I think that the more important point here is that this is just a misdirection. And there's been a concerted effort. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the last couple of days, there have been a number of op-ed pieces from members of the legislature that basically is sort of a concerted strategy here of budget misdirection, so that we're not actually having the conversation that we should be having about the budget. And you alluded to this because, the real conversation we need to be having is about revenue, and that's a tough conversation to have, and people don't want to have it. And I think there's been this oversimplification by a number of Republican legislators to want to say, look, Governor Wolf wants to spend, and tax into oblivion, and that's just not the case. They are, again, trying to be part of, it's a concerted misdirection strategy when we need to be talking about smart ways to increase revenue, and so that we can fully fund things like public education and the services throughout the state that need to be funded. So we should have that conversation and not this other conversation that I think Republican legislators want us to be having.
Now, I mean, the reality is we have a structural hole, and we've had it for a while, and all of the games and all of the smoke and mirrors and the gimmicks and the bubble gum and barbed wire are not going to change that.
Yeah, well, and I think gimmicks is an important component of this, right? Because I think Senator Corman, for example, had an op-ed on Live yesterday, and again, it was another one of the instances where it's the talking points about the pensions being the problem here, but in reality, it is both sort of budget gimmicks by the Republicans over the last few years, and frankly, the General Assembly and past governors who have been irresponsible about paying what needs to be paid to the pensions, paying down the pensions that have put us in the spot that we're in right now. But that doesn't mean that pensions are the problem. The problem is budget gimmickry.
Right.
Gimmickry. And so we need to address that. We need to have a real conversation about revenues. And the thing that we can't forget is that everybody this past year came to an agreement. We were very close to passing a compromise budget. And in the end, the problem is that, the Republicans would not face facts and have a real, honest conversation about the revenue mechanisms to pay for that budget. That's the problem.
Well, I mean, what we've seen over the last really 30 years, John, is this tax cut fetish, and what we're kind of at the end of the road. to where either we're going to raise taxes. I mean, we're at this default moment. Either we're going to have to raise revenue through various taxes, or we're going to have to slash and burn things like education and health and human service spending. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And yet you have on the Republican side, they don't want to fess up to that reality. It is, to me, again, it's about that smoke and mirror.
Absolutely. And the op-ed that I'm talking about, Senator Corman's op-ed in 10 Live yesterday, it says exactly the opposite of what you are saying. And you are correct. But what that op-ed says is basically, no, it's not an either-or proposition. And then he goes on to talk about pensions and tries to make pensions the real problem here, the real culprit. And obviously, again, sort of hanging this on the necks of teachers here in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the thought in a lot of ways, and other public sector workers in Pennsylvania. And that is completely unfair. And you're absolutely right. That is the crossroads we're at right now. That is the question. The question is, are we going to be honest and do right by Pennsylvanians and find revenue streams? And there are plenty of options, as we've talked about many, many times, Rick. There are plenty of options for increased revenue that is not a burden on working class Pennsylvanians. Whether that is a shale tax, whether that is through closing corporate loopholes. I think one of the things that we've talked a little bit about is that if we tax corporations at the same rate that we did in the late 80s, early 90s here in Pennsylvania, we would have a budget surplus right now, even with any of the options on the table for spending for 2015, 2016. We'd have a budget surplus.
Right.
There are lots of options for revenue that are not going to affect working Pennsylvania.
Right, but, John, that's not just here in Pennsylvania. That's all across the country. And you could even go, I don't even think you're talking about going back to the days of Dwight David Eisenhower, at which our coffers would be flush and overflowing if corporations paid the same share of the tax burden that they did back then. But again, I come back to this tax cut fetish that especially the Republicans and a lot of Democrats as well have bought into this idea that if we give the corporations all of this money, we give them all this tax breaks, they're going to create all these jobs, and it's going to be the utopian paradise of rivers of golden honey that just haven't happened.
Right. No, absolutely. No question. I mean, this has been a long-term concerted messaging war waged by business-oriented conservatives, and they unfortunately have really done a great job in fighting that war. And you have folks like Grover Norquist who have made a career on getting legislators from the state level up to the federal level to sign pledges of no new taxes, and in some respects, that's become an absolute must for them to win Republican primaries. In a lot of places. I mean, in most places, that is going to be the case. That is a huge problem because governing is about being honest about the problems that you have in a state, and that's just not happening in Pennsylvania. But you're right; it's happening at the federal level, and it's happening in many, many, many states across the country. Where you saw in a year like 2010, when these conservative Republicans took over many, many state houses, lots of states are dealing with this same problem. And as you and I have talked about so many times, the worst part of it is that the folks that feel the effects of this kind of political battle the most are kids in public schools, are folks that are relying on really, really critical social services in an area where a lot of the funding comes from the state. So that's the unfortunate reality that we're living in right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember when paying your bills and paying for what we need as a society became being an insane tax and spend liberal that needs to be arrested by the Capitol Police and drug in front of the legislature. I don't remember, the day that happened, but we're here.
Well, and this is what happens when politics and us always being in an election cycle sort of supersedes everything, the responsibility that lawmakers have to their constituents. That is absolutely the problem here, because, like we said, you go back to that notion that raising taxes is the hot potato, and that no Republican legislators are interested in facing the facts and having a real conversation about revenue increases that are absolutely necessary, just to maintain spending levels. I mean, we're not even. There's also this notion that government spending here in Pennsylvania, this is this huge behemoth, and that Trib editorial is trying to spin that message, right? That we are spending beyond our means. Basically, what the governor's budget is that proposal from this past year is trying to maintain funding levels. It's trying to restore some of the massive cuts to public education that we've seen during the Corbett years. This is not some spending behemoth here, the Pennsylvania state government that we're talking about. Trying to maintain spending levels, deal with inflation, which is always going to be something we have to deal with. And it's about figuring out smart ways to raise revenue, because you have to do it. Yeah. That's what being a responsible legislator is.
And really putting out to the people of the state of Pennsylvania exactly what and where and how and all of that, and being open and honest and transparent about the budget process as well. So let me ask you the last question then. The governor just gave his budget address. I don't even know that we're completely finished with last year's budget. Some say we are, some say we aren't. Is this latest budget proposal dead on arrival, and what does it mean for next Christmas?
That is the, $36 billion question, Rick. I think that, unfortunately, so let's say this way, to their credit, you have social service organizations and school districts across the state that are doing everything they can to keep the doors open, to keep educating our kids as best they can. And so, to their credit, I think in a lot of ways, folks have not necessarily felt the effects in the way that maybe we anticipated they would be by this point.
Right.
And so I think that is, again, it's a good thing for people living their lives and having their kids, get a good education. But it also is a challenge, I think, for the governor because I think it's important that pressure is to be put on Republican legislators to come to the table and have a real conversation about the need for a responsible budget. Unfortunately, I think that as time goes on, people are going to feel the effects more and more. There is a tipping point. We've talked about this before. I don't know where that tipping point is. And it's so unfortunate that it's come to that. But I think that's just the sort of the budget status quo that we live in now. And hopefully lawmakers will realize that they need to be responsible and come to the table and have a real conversation about what needs to be done for all Pennsylvanians sooner rather than later.
I'm with you. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And as it does, we'd love to have you back. Keep us up to date on what's going on there at the Capitol.
I'm always happy to do it. It's great talking to you, Rick.
John, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. John Neurohr, Communications Director for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. If you want to check out their website, penbpc.org, the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on John's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
We gotta get old tonight. We gotta do it today. No more madness confusion. No more disarray. We gotta get old tonight.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Big news, people. Especially for those of you upset by the skyrocketing prices of the essential prescription medicines you take, including thousands of patients who were hit last year with a 5,000% increase in one life-saving drug. Determined to do something about those despised price hikes, drug makers themselves have reached into their corporate toolbox for the two most effective means they have to fix their price problem. Of course, putting more corporate cash into research to produce new medicines would be one of those tools, and a renewed commitment to honest competition would be the other, right? Right. But Big Pharma gave up years ago on doing right, turning to two other corporate tools that have reliably generated a gusher of profits for them: advertising and lobbying. So here they come, wielding bigger-than-ever ad and lobbying budgets to deal with that pesky matter of public anger at drug company price gouging. The intent of the multimillion-dollar PR blitz and intensified offensive in Congress is not to restrain the gouging, but to improve the industry's image in hopes of restraining lawmakers from taking steps to rein in prescription costs. Of course, their ads dishonestly fail to mention this selfish intent, instead pitching drug makers as selfless saviors of humanity. They feature soft scenes of drug researchers in white lab coats urgently trying to find new cures, scripted testimonials from people posed as patients who've been saved by Big Pharma, and, of course, scenes of drug makers altruistically aiding poor people. This is Jim Hightower saying, so, you see, the industry is spending millions on this corporate medicine show not to protect its notorious profiteering, but to protect you from public officials who might try to stop them from overcharging you. These incorrigible gougers are enough to make you sick.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Another bit of Ben Carsonism. I saw this yesterday, and I didn't want to bring it up on air because I thought it was an onion. Not an onion. They're a little more respectable than this. But I thought it was like a satirical site that was putting it out, and I didn't do anything until I saw a more reputable source on it. But evidently, Ben Carson said that the president didn't understand the black experience in America because he didn't grow up like Ben Carson did. That he grew up, and you cannot make this up. And like I said, look, I wanted to make sure that I got it right. But he said, look, because you're black, you think you have to think a certain way. And if you don't think that way, you're an Uncle Tom. Whereas if I weren't black, then I would just be a Republican. He said the problem with the president is that the president really doesn't kind of understand because he was raised white. And I got to be honest, it's the reverse race card.
Oh, did he pull like a reverse Michael Jackson? Is that what Ben Carson is trying to suggest here?
He says, I've been around for 64 years. I've had a chance to see what real racism is. You don't think that right from the beginning when the black guy got into the White House, when they gave him the keys, that Mitch McConnell, Rush Limbaugh, all of them, I hope he fails. I hope my job's to make him a one-term president. You don't think that played front and center to all of this?
Oh, my goodness. Or that race had anything to do with that in the first place? Does anybody remember some of the stuff that was being said about him, like verbatim back in the day? It was disgusting. Yeah. Ben Carson. You and your neurosurgeon, what is it, Ivy League educated, couldn't possibly understand,
the president and the experience of Black America, a bit of a stretch for him.
Because
he's raised white.
Because Ben Carson is like the, poster child for the typical African-American experience.
But I would argue, and this is where Ben Carson does have a story. I mean, he grew up poor in Boston and grew up poor in Detroit, and because he was a smart guy, and there were people who moved him along, and there were a lot of things, that he benefited from,
He does, absolutely.
It's kind of like Clarence Thomas coming out against affirmative action. It's one of those amazing little moments where you go, really?
See, that's the thing. He has really seized opportunities for himself and gone on to make more opportunities for himself. But his policies that he supports, the things that come out of his mouth, just would prevent other people from having those same opportunities and being able to make that same kind of growth. It's hypocritical.
Yeah. Again, it's it's one of those things that just kind of made me chuckle when I saw it, and I go, "Oh, it's got to be satire," because it's you're not black enough.
Oh,
I mean, it's really kind of wow.
It's very. I mean, I'm not wowed by anything Ben Carson says.
No,
I would be very wowed if he said it with his eyes open and with his hands in a relatively normal place, because he's not flailing all the time.
You got to do what you got to do. You got to do what you got to do. Wow. But there you go. He was raised white.
He was raised white.
Wow. Let's take a quick break.
Oh my goodness.
All right, back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Somebody said I'm with you, but it's too late to take this place. And you said I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be are too great, so walk away from the rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For WIN, I'm Joanne Powers. Economic Policy Institute senior economic analyst Dave Cooper says raising the federal minimum wage to $12 an hour would save American taxpayers $17 billion in public assistance spending. That because many corporations pay workers so little they qualify for public assistance programs.
The point is that if we want low-income families to be able to have a decent life, we need to take a closer look at what they're being paid and what we're expecting of businesses. Big corporations are achieving extraordinary profits at the same time that their workers are relying on food stamps.
Cooper says huge tax savings are possible through raising wages.
Well, there are many things we could do to lift wages, but the most straightforward is to raise the minimum wage. Increasing the federal minimum wage to $12 by 2020 would lift wages for over 35 million workers nationwide and generate about $17 billion in savings to government assistance programs. That $17 billion could then be used to make our anti-poverty program stronger or make long overdue investments in education or public infrastructure.
The Chicago Teachers Union says privatized nursing services are driving Chicago schools to the brink of a health crisis. A report called Nursing Services at CPS says an epidemic of outsourced nursing services is affecting the health of 400,000 students throughout the Chicago school district. The union will present its findings to the school board Wednesday. The Chicago Teachers Union says RCM Technologies got a $30 million contract from the school district in 2015, but the union says the company is failing to meet its obligations. Some school nurses are reporting stories of RCM staff untrained to deliver basic tasks and a high turnover rate for outsourced nurses. The union says this outsourcing of nurses is designed to ultimately eliminate union nursing jobs, replacing them with temporary nurses with no job protection or employment benefits. Teamsters workers Tuesday protested the $10.3 billion purchase of Airgas by the French company Air Liquide. Bringing their protest to the Houston headquarters of Airgas, the workers demanded that Air Liquide stop its attacks on workers and their unions. Teamsters General Secretary-Treasurer Ken Hall says Air Liquide and Airgas have been conducting a campaign of wage discrimination, threatening workers with loss of health care, benefits, and wages during collective bargaining, and attempts at union busting by threatening union activists. The Teamsters say the company would never get away with treating its French workers this way.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender, offering a wide range of treasury management services designed to control cost, improve cash flow, and simplify accounting for unions. Online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You know, we talk about Governor Rick Snyder out in Michigan. And, you know, one of his senior advisors said the other day, this Dennis Shornack, that you cannot run government like a business. It's something we've talked about quite often here on the program, that you can't have the bean counters running public services. You can't have the bean counters making decisions over people's healths solely based on a spreadsheet. And this is what this Dennis Cernak said to the Detroit Free Press, that you can't run it like a business. Government is not a business, and that the people of Flint got stuck on the losing end of decisions driven by spreadsheets instead of water quality and public health. So the question then becomes, and one of the things I want to talk about in this segment is, look at the investment that we need to be making. Look at what's happened in places like Flint, in places like Cleveland, in places like Detroit, and across this country where we've had deindustrialization and then, disinvestment in our infrastructure. What should we be doing to make sure that the water we drink is safe and clean and affordable, unlike Flint that had some of the highest water rates in the entire country for poisoned water? What should we be doing? How do we rebuild? Is there something being done? That to me is the answer. And what should we be doing? So today we're going to be talking with the good folks from the Blue Green Alliance about their campaign to stand up for clean water. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Carrie Mosley, the Pennsylvania Regional Programs Director for the Blue Green Alliance. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Drug and Hospital Employees Union Local 1199 sent a telegram to President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The message declared the union's stand against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They were the first union local to take an official stand against the war. However, it should not have surprised anyone that Local 1199 was willing to take such a public stand. From their founding, they have been deeply committed to broad social justice unionism. The union started in 1932 in New York City. In the beginning, their membership was mostly Jewish men working in drugstores. During their first decade, they led pickets for a living wage and against segregation. During the 1950s, they held organizing drives in the city's not-for-profit hospitals. This brought many African American and Latino women into the union. These workers were often paid wages as low as $32 per week and worked extremely long hours. The union helped them win a $100 a week minimum wage. The union had become an important voice for workers in the city's nonprofit hospitals. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Local 1199 the authentic conscience of the labor movement. The union expanded its organizing beyond New York in 1969. They helped organize a successful strike of hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina. From there, they launched organizing campaigns of hospital workers in other states. Over the years, the union has stood in solidarity with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's efforts to organize farm workers. They opposed apartheid in South Africa. They were also an early opponent of the war in Iraq. Today, the local is affiliated with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So in looking at what's going on in Flint and a lot of poor communities across the country, the question has become, what happened to the Clean Water Act? What happened to our oversight? What the EPA do? And what do we need to be doing to bring that all back into line? How do we stand up for clean water, which is why I've asked Kahari Mosley. He is the Pennsylvania Regional Programs Manager for the folks at the Blue Green Alliance. Kahari, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rick.
So, I look at what's going on in Flint, and while it is a horrible tragedy, To me, it's just one instance in, I'm sure, something that's been replicated hundreds of times across this country we just don't know about yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, this is not just Flint. This is something that is affecting us all over the country. And in the 21st century, Americans should expect that the water coming out of their faucet is safe and clean. But unfortunately, in Flint and many other communities, many of those low-income communities and communities of color, the water that they're drinking is polluted with lead and other toxic chemicals, and it doesn't need to be that way. We really need to invest in our infrastructure. So this is not just, the situation that's going on in Flint, and not just, the leadership of what's going on in Michigan and decisions that have been made by the governor, but this is also about a national issue of us not investing in our infrastructure.
No, absolutely. And, I've been saying this for a long time. Where our studio is here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, what I call the sinkhole capital of the country. We had like 42 sinkholes in a year because of the infrastructure under the ground that carries the water is collapsing. And with it, the streets are going with it. And it's because we haven't for a couple of generations now. I mean, our infrastructure is some places 120, 130 years old. I would argue about time we replace some of that.
Absolutely. I'm from Pittsburgh, but this is not, just Pittsburgh. This is not just Harrisburg. This is all over the country. And we know from studies and from firsthand accounts like yours, our country's infrastructure is in dire need of repair. Bridges are falling down, transit systems are breaking down, too little maintenance, too little funding. Our natural gas pipelines under our feet are leaking methane, and the crumbling water systems lose billions of gallons of drinking water a day. So we really need to, really take this moment, and unfortunately how horrible it is for the people of Flint, particularly the children of Flint who have been poisoned. But this is really could be a teachable moment for the people of not just Flint and Michigan, but for everyone in this country. And this situation is coming to your town.
Absolutely.
It may not be the exact same situation, but it's going to be a similar situation if we don't begin to invest the dollars we need to modernize our infrastructure all over this country.
Because, you hit on a really important point, because I think my generation especially, I'm 48, and the younger generations, maybe people a little bit older, they don't remember what it took to build the infrastructure. We've always just turned on the tap and their water came out. We've always flipped on the light switch and power is there. As these systems are breaking down, I think we have to, as a nation, come to the reality is it's not always going to be there. You actually have to fix this stuff and upgrade and move to new technology.
Absolutely. I echo everything you just said there. Me at 39 years old, people of my generation, as you said, they just expect to flip the light switch on. They expect to flip the water on. They expect to drive on roads that are well maintained. And we do not have a full understanding of the type of public investment it takes to build a world-class infrastructure and what made our economy so strong in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we haven't made those investments. And, we owe this, to the future of this country. We owe it to the people of Flint to demand bold investments to repair our infrastructure in every community in this country. And we can't afford to wait any longer. If this situation in Flint is not a stark reminder of just the devastating price that we'll pay, and in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. When is going to be the next city? And if we don't make these investments now, I just can't emphasize how important it is to make these investments. And unfortunately, the people of Flint, and particularly the children of Flint, have to suffer, but we owe it to them to begin those investments in Flint and Michigan and all over the country.
What's interesting to me, Kari, is that now we see the money flowing into Flint. Oh, we're going to spend millions of dollars on remediation, millions of dollars and eventual lawsuits and all kind of stuff that we'll find the money for. But we couldn't spend the money up front to make sure it didn't happen. That's the really twisted thing in my mind.
No, absolutely, and it costs more. Every day we wait to make these investments is going to cost that much more. And like you said, not just the lawsuits and not just litigation and other things, just the fact that every day it just costs more by waiting. And then there's things we can't put the price on. When we look at roads and bridges in particular, some of the catastrophic incidents that we've seen around the country in Minnesota and some other places where we've seen bridges collapse during rush hour. It's like, why do we need to have poisoned children and bridge collapses and sinkholes and catastrophic events to wake us up to say, you know what, we need to make this public investment in our infrastructure? Because not only is it a public safety issue, it's an economic issue. It strengthens our economy. Having good infrastructure, doesn't just keep people safe, but it creates jobs, creates great jobs, great building trades jobs, union jobs, the type of jobs that one can sustain a family on. But it also just strengthens the economy, allows us to move people, goods, and services throughout our economy in a much more efficient way. Yep. And I really can't understand why we can't come together. Generation after generation, on both sides of the aisle, we were always able to come together around infrastructure. It was always a bipartisan issue.
Well, I'll tell you.
I understand over the last 5 or 10 years, something has changed in this country, and we don't want to make those same kind of investments anymore.
No, I'll tell you the story that the judge here, I had an opportunity to meet a judge who was on the school board back in the 70s, and he said we were talking about replacing all of the piping and all of the sewer systems and everything back in the 70s. We couldn't find how it was going to be paid for. Nobody wanted to step up and pay for it, and nobody wanted to go to the taxpayers and say we need to invest in this. And what's happened, Kahari, and I'm sure you know this, is we have a political party in this country who has a tax cut fetish. We keep giving money to the very wealthy and to big corporations and allowing them to skirt responsibility to this country while we are systematically dismantling all of the investments of the past and watching our infrastructure and really the future of this country crumble.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, unfortunately, it's something that, the public doesn't see every day. We don't have an opportunity to see these leaking pipes, these leaking gas pipes, these leaking water pipes. In many ways, they're invisible. They're in the ground. Just getting older and older and older, and more disrepair and more disrepair.
Yep.
And so sometimes it's easy to forget. And again, as we mentioned earlier, so many Americans don't remember the time, like maybe our grandparents or our great grandparents, when we didn't have a world-class infrastructure that was built, during the World War II era, after the World War II era. So we really have taken it for granted. We've gotten to a place where we've taken our infrastructure for granted, and now, like you said, because of the last 30 or 40 years, the political trends of less taxes, less public investment, I want to keep my money. We've lost the value of it. We lost the value of it. We don't really make the connection to our actual collective quality of life and what that means when we make these public investments. And we think, for some strange reason, that something's being taken away from us when we make these public investments, when we really don't understand that we're actually enhancing our community, strengthening our quality of life, creating jobs, strengthening our economy, and actually making our community safer. And this is something that, politicians on both sides of the aisle and activists and people that care about the future of this country need to get together soon and begin to educate door to door, neighbor to neighbor, and really say, if we don't make this kind of, transformational investment in our infrastructure, there will be a lot more to pay than just Flint.
Exactly. I mean, look, I don't like paying taxes any more than anyone else does. But at the end of the day, I remember the auto repair company ad from the 1970s, 80s. Pay me, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. But one way or another, you're still going to pay. It's just depending if you're going to make the investments up front and early, that'll be less costly, or down the road when it's going to be much, much more costly and much more devastating. Either way, you're paying. It's just a matter of when and how much.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why the Blue-Green Alliance created a program that we call RECAP. It's called Repairing Our City's Aging Pipelines. And it focuses on finding best practices and solutions to repair and place leaking natural gas pipelines in towns and cities all over this country. And then, so we've been not only here in Pennsylvania, where I serve as the state director, but in all the states that we work in, throughout the Midwest and on the coast, really just trying to preach the gospel to anybody who would listen. about the importance of making these investments. And again, how it strengthens our economy, how it creates jobs, how it makes our community safer, and really improves our quality of life across the board.
And we make sure that we protect our water, because at the end of the day, I've been saying for years, water is going to be that thing in the next several years we're going to be fighting wars over. We shouldn't be polluting the clean, drinkable water we have here, and we should be protecting that. And I look at what's going on in a lot of the drilling areas. Pennsylvania has a lot of drilling going on in the Marcellus Shale area, and there are people who are concerned about that, about polluting the water. To me, those are important issues.
Absolutely. No, those are extremely important issues, and we know, the issue of hydraulic fracturing has proponents and opponents on both sides. But one thing that we can agree on, even I work with a number of unions that work in those industries, and while they are big proponents, of taking advantage of the natural gas that Pennsylvania sits on, one thing that we all agree on is the importance of making sure we know what chemicals are going into the process, making sure that we are protecting those aquifers and protecting those water systems that are close to there. So it's very important that we continue to find those alliances in those areas that we can agree on and protect our water. Obviously, being in Pennsylvania, part of the Great Lakes region, it's so important, to protect those lakes, to protect those rivers, whether it's the Allegheny, the Monongahela, the Susquehanna, the Schuylkill, what have you. It's very important to protect those water systems because, like you said, as climate change, continues to impact the world and this country and this part of the country in particular in the Northeast, water and clean, drinkable water is going to become more and more of an issue. And like you said, I hope, your prophecy doesn't become true, but unfortunately, by all accounts, we're seeing it around the world. Even the situation in Syria, which obviously there's many factors that have created some of those situations over there. But one of the things that I've read is this extreme drought that's occurred in that part of the world, and how the extreme drought exacerbated some of the other situations that were already going on, and that's only going to be something that we're going to see more and more as there is more droughts, like there is in the southern United States, and droughts like there is in the Middle East, and that shortage of water is going to create some very devastating situations throughout the world.
Yeah, I mean, you say what you want. At the end of the day, we can conceivably live without oil. Water, you cannot live without.
Absolutely.
So how do we protect this? I know you guys, the Blue Green Alliance, are doing a campaign, Stand Up for Clean Water. How do we help? What do we do? What's all in that?
Absolutely. The first thing you do is go to our website, www.bluegreenalliance.org, and you can find out more as well there. But the campaign is all part of our larger infrastructure campaign. We're working to make sure that our water systems are clean, making sure that regions are making investments in clean water. We're also, working to make sure that the cities and regions are investing in green infrastructure, things to address stormwater runoff and really to protect our water systems, modernize our water systems, and make overall make water safer and make sure that Americans have access to clean water so we can avoid situations that are going on in Flint. And we're working hard here in Pennsylvania, here in Pittsburgh, through the leadership of the mayor and county executive, have been taking major steps in addressing the consent decree that they have with the EPA here in the Alcazar district, trying to implement green infrastructure strategies to protect the stormwater runoff and to keep our rivers clean and to keep our water systems clean. So, I really applaud the leadership here in Western Pennsylvania, but we're seeing this all over the country. People stepping up, understanding the importance of this, and trying to find ways, obviously in a climate where public investment isn't so popular, to really be evangelists on these issues and really, really convert people into believers to really see the importance of making these investments in their water systems.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, and look, I want to believe that investing in the future is a good thing because I want my kids to have at least the opportunities that I had, and at least my kids and grandkids and great-grandkids to turn on that water faucet and out come good, clean water. without paying an arm and a leg, especially to a privatized company. I want them to have the same opportunities and even greater than I had.
Absolutely. I mean, as we said, earlier, this is so important. This is going to be one of the most important issues over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And we have an opportunity to get ahead of it now. And again, we owe this to the people of Flint, Michigan, who unfortunately, really are suffering right now and really are kind of the city that's waking people up all over the country. And if we don't look at this situation and make sure this doesn't happen again, not only are we doing the people of Flint a disservice, we're doing the people all over this country, a disservice by not getting ahead of this issue.
Yeah, shame on us. Again, if you want to check out the website, just go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Kahari Mosley's name, and take you right to the Blue Green Alliance website of how you can sign up to get some information on how do we stand up for clean water. And I highly suggest folks go. Kahari, I appreciate you taking time for us. I'd love to talk to you again at some point in the very near future.
Absolutely looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Rick.
Great talking with you. Again, if you want to check out that website, just go to thericksmithshow.com. Click on Kahari Mosley's name, take you right there. Again, Blue Green Alliance is where you go, bluegreenalliance.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. The U.S. Congress passed the child labor tax law. At the turn of the 20th century, child labor had increasingly become an issue of concern in the United States. In 1890, the census found more than 1 million children between the ages of 10 and 15 in the workforce. By 1910, that number had exceeded 2 million working children. Many of these children worked long hours in unhealthy conditions for low wages. Progressive activists led campaigns to bring national attention to the plight of these working children. As a result, many individual states passed limits on children's work. Nationally, there was no uniform legislation. Southern lawmakers were unwilling to push for child protections because local factory owners insisted child labor was necessary if Southern businesses were going to compete with manufacturers in the North. The state laws that did exist were poorly enforced, especially in Southern states. In 1909, a survey of South Carolina mills found that nearly 92% of them were violating what little child labor regulations were in place. In 1916, the U.S. Congress attempted to regulate child labor, but a federal judge ruled that legislation unconstitutional. Undeterred, Congress tried again in 1919. They passed a law that said companies in certain industries would face a 10% tax on their profits for hiring child labor. The act defined child labor as any worker under the age of 16 in any mine or quarry and under the age of 14 in any mill, cannery, workshop, factory, or manufacturing establishment. Within a few years, the Supreme Court found that law unconstitutional. In an 8-1 decision, the court ruled that Congress could not use taxes to enforce regulatory power. Although it was only in effect briefly, the child labor tax law did cause a downturn in the use of child labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I look at this, and thanks to Kahari Mosley for talking to us from the Blue Green Alliance. And again, highly suggest bluegreenalliance.com. Go there, sign up, get the newsletter, get on the list, get the activist stuff going. But to me, there's some legislation that I know that's banging around right now, especially in the Senate. They've got a Federal Water Quality Protection Act, Senate Bill 1140, that evidently, is out there being banged around that I'm not quite so sure that would be good. And I think we need to be talking about, what do we do? Much like in the 1970s when we went through the Clean Air and Water Acts, when we were talking about that, what does that look like for us? So I go back to this, and mentally I'm kind of thinking about, that era. And, I remember when I was a kid in Cleveland, you go back to the time when you're looking at the amount of pollution in the air. You go back and you look at what we did to eliminate acid rain, what we did to take lead out of our economy. To me, we can do great things if we simply just kind of, think about it. And clean water is almost a no-brainer in my view. Should be no-brainer. We turn on the tap, clean water comes out. Yet our infrastructure is so bad. And you look at Flint as the example of this. They knew the pipes were corroded, lead pipes with lead with lead flux and all of that. They knew, and they did it anyway. Why? Business decision. We're going to save a couple of dollars. And this is what happens when you have business-minded people running our government. Because at the end of the day, government stands at the end of the road, doesn't it? Government can't say, well, we're going to push it off on someone else. They're the ones, we the people, our government, through us, is what has to clean things up. So when you have these big steel companies who have been polluting for years, and you have paint factories, and you have all of this industry that's been doing these things all these years, pushing off the external costs to us, who stands at the end of the road? Because you can't have government go, well, we'll just push it off on ourselves again. Seems kind of ridiculous. But it's what the business governance people want us to think is possible. That there's someone else down the road we can push it off on. And I look at Flint and other places, and this is what happens when you go, well, you know what? The heck with them. We'll give them polluted water, charge them double rates, and they'll be grateful for it. Fortunately, and good on us for waking up and seeing that this is a real problem. I just hope that as it happens again, as more pop up, that we eventually push back. And good on Kahari and the folks at the Blue Green Alliance for the work that they're doing there. Now, for me, I go back and I think about, when I was a kid, being in Cleveland, Ohio, home of the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, there was a time through policy that we cleaned up Lake Erie. When I was a kid, you could go nowhere near Lake Erie. It was a brown, soupy mess of dead everything. The only fish you saw in Lake Erie were floating sideways. And literally, you could not go in the water. And I never did because my mother said, you will not do well. Because what you saw is you saw the steel mills polluting into it. You had big chemical companies who had numerous pipeline breaches that just flooded into the lake. This is what sustains our lives. And if we can do what we did back in the 70s, because now Lake Erie is a living, thriving, really a good example of policy gone right. If we can do that back then, we can easily do this now. And for me, that's really the point of all of this. Through our government, us collectively saying we can fix our infrastructure, we can rebuild for the future, we can give to our kids all of the things that we expected ourselves. To me, that simple. Just is what it is. So we're going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The ground keeps shaking in Oklahoma, and more violently.
Oklahoma finally acts to reduce man-made fracking earthquakes.
We will not extract fossil fuels in the future from any public lands.
Bernie Sanders promises to end drilling on federal property. Hillary Clinton promises to end drilling off the Atlantic coast. A slap on the wrist for the CEO behind West Virginia's toxic chemical spill. Plus,
cleanup is underway after one of the most powerful storms on record tore through Fiji.
Tropical cyclone Winston smashes the record for the strongest hurricane ever in the Southern Hemisphere.
All of those records and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
An exact replica of the Titanic will set sail in 2018. And this time it should be perfectly safe, because by then we should be out of icebergs.
And that would be funnier if it weren't quite as true. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the average number of earthquakes in Oklahoma is now 2.5 per day. It used to be 1.5 per year.
Yep, and now Oklahoma is the earthquake capital of the United States, surpassing even California. The earthquakes have been linked by the U.S. Geological Survey to the fracking industry's use of deep underground wells to dispose of toxic fracking wastewater. Oklahoma residents have now filed class action lawsuits against companies seeking damages because they say it's now impacting their property values.
You have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate that's being damaged by that activity.
And now, after years of denying the link between fracking and earthquakes, now the state of Oklahoma is finally taking action. Sort of. Regulators have ordered operators of only 250 injection wells to limit the depth and the volume of the toxic fracking wastewater that they inject deep underground by a whopping 40%.
So wait, so they put this wastewater into the ground, that makes the rocks slippery, causes earthquakes. Are they suggesting that if you put less water in?
And less deeply, then it'll back off those earthquakes a little bit.
Yeah, good luck with that.
In the battle for the Democratic Party presidential nomination, both candidates are pushing hard to further restrict fossil fuel extraction on public lands and territories. At the most recent Democratic town hall hosted by MSNBC, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont pledged to end all oil and gas exploration on lands owned by taxpayers. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton hasn't gone so far as to promise to end fossil fuel drilling on public lands, but she has now come out against offshore drilling off the Atlantic coast. Now, she had already pledged to end drilling in the Arctic, and Clinton has been slow to catch up to Senator Sanders' push for policies that keep fossil fuels in the ground. But she's trying to make up the difference in some fashion.
Amazing how just a few years ago, the Republican motto was drill, baby, drill. And now you've got Democrats out there saying, no more drilling wherever we can stop it. And they're doing it proudly and don't seem to be taking much blowback for it. Good for them.
On the Republican side of the presidential race, Ohio Governor John Kasich may have been trying to distinguish himself from the remaining Republican candidates when at a Vermont town hall over the weekend, he said he accepts that humans have some effect on the climate.
I do not know how much that individuals affect the climate, but here's what I do know. I know that we need to develop all of the renewables, and we need to do it in an orderly way, and we need to have wind, and we need to have solar.
So he's not an out-and-out denier? Maybe that's progress on the Republican side?
It's a line that the remaining Republicans have been trying out. They've been supporting wind and solar, but they don't support any curbs on fossil fuels or greenhouse gas emissions. Those are what actually cause climate change. Meanwhile, record warm oceans turbocharged a record hurricane season in 2015, and the record-breaking continues in 2016. Tropical cyclone Winston made landfall in the island nation of Fiji as a Category 5 storm over the weekend, killing at least 28 people and causing widespread destruction. Tropical cyclone Winston broke the record for the strongest cyclone ever recorded in the southern hemisphere. That's just 4 months after Hurricane Patricia broke the record for the strongest storm ever recorded anywhere on the planet. Finally, remember the West Virginia chemical spill when toxic coal waste from a decrepit storage tank farm contaminated the drinking water supply of 300,000 people back in 2014?
I do. Freedom Industries, they called themselves.
Yep. The former president of Freedom Industries was also charged with negligence, bankruptcy fraud, and perjury for lying to investigators in a scheme to protect his personal fortune from liability after the disaster. Well, he's been sentenced. The millionaire CEO was sentenced to to 1 month in prison and a fine of $20,000, the absolute minimum sentence allowed.
Unbelievable. Well, I guess if he's sentenced to even 1 month at this point, we should be happy there's any accountability for these guys whatsoever. Amazing. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So, some interesting news coming out. Again, I'm a little leery. I don't like it. If it's true, if the rumors are true, that President Obama is looking at the governor of Nevada as the replacement for the Supreme Court. Not thrilled, not happy. But I got to be honest, not surprised. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Media News Service. Justin, is it true? Brian Sandoval, really?
It looks like that could be the choice. It apparently is true that the White House has been vetting him. It looks like, Senator Harry Reid, the top Democrat in the Senate, has met with him as, probably sort of a ploy to get him out of Nevada. And it looks like it could very well be the possibility. We have had some members of the Judiciary Committee saying that they would not move forward with anybody, even if it was a Republican, such as, Brian Sandoval. But, nevertheless, this is kind of hard for Republicans to say no to. Ultimately, this could be chalked up as a win for them. This is a way to, get somebody who is, a Republican to remain on the bench, and it's probably the best deal that they can do, particularly considering that this is sort of a concession from Obama to try to get somebody on the bench as soon as possible. And, ultimately, it's probably a much more moderate choice than, Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders would probably make if they were elected and therefore given a mandate that not even the GOP could resist.
Yeah, so I got to be honest. If this is the case, let's wait till the next president.
Yeah, and still that could very well be the situation that we could see here. It doesn't look like Republicans are necessarily going to, move away from their issues on this. They've sort of, taken a lockstep position that this should be the American people's, chance to give their say during the next time around in order to give them a say in this democratic process, even though they already voted for Barack Obama. So it's a little bit strange on that front, and it would be kind of a big sort of about face for Mitch McConnell and everybody else to suddenly say, no, that concern no longer matters now that we have a Republican who is nominated. So I think ultimately, we could see them sort of digging in their heels, and then Obama will kind of get the best of both worlds. He'll get to essentially campaign, against Republicans, saying that they're so, out there, they're so opposed to his presidency, so unwilling to do their constitutional duty that they're willing to play politics with a member of their own party and block him, and then essentially wait for the next person to be elected, and then just kind of, move forward with their nominee. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. There's a lot of, kind of political machinations in the work, but it could be, a benefit at the end of the day.
Yeah, I look at this and, wow. Talk about negotiating with yourself. Because, look, if all of that political stuff plays out as you've laid it out, if that's possible, okay, good. But, wow, that a lot of backfire there.
No, it certainly is. This is sort of the reality of what we have right now. This is somebody, who is probably the only person that Obama could put forward who would, pass and would not have sort of a huge, uprising against him from the people that, remain in his corner moving forward with the election. But nevertheless, this is somebody who is not really well liked by a lot of labor unions. This is somebody who is, however, good when it comes to abortion and social issues and when it comes to the environment. But he does not really have a good a good record when it comes to labor, and that, of course, is going to be something that could end up biting him once we have confirmation hearings. Particularly, from the Democratic side of things.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of my labor friends not being pleased at all because the legacy of putting the most moderate guy on the court, and I don't know. No, I'm not liking this. Not liking it.
Yeah, No, it's an interesting choice, but we still have to kind of see if they're going to move forward with this. This was very obviously kind of leaked by the administration, so we're going to, we're pretty much doing what exactly they.
Lead balloon. I'll give you what you want. It's a lead balloon.
There we go.
So let that crash, and let's move on to having a real discussion about who we put on it. I understand the president has invited the Senate Republicans to the White House to have a little talk, and they said no.
Yeah, I know. We had the president inviting Chuck Grassley, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, as well as Mitch McConnell to the White House to try to find a way forward on the direction for the Supreme Court. According to the staffers, it looks like this is going to be a very unlikely meeting. And that they're ultimately going to be balking at it, saying that this is, essentially little more than a photo op. And this, of course, is after, pretty much almost 8 years of Mitch McConnell saying that Obama has ignored, particularly Republicans in Congress, particularly, Mitch McConnell and whatnot. And there's been sort of a lot of anger over his apparent snub over the GOP. And, of course, now that he's actually inviting them to one of these sort of essentially kind of fruitless symbolic White House meetings, this is when they are deciding it's a photo op. So kind of politics as usual, I guess.
And I disagree. I mean, politics as usual would be they show up, they shake hands for the cameras, they go behind closed doors, they yell, they scream, or they don't even talk about the real issue, but they at least allow the people, the voters, the public to think that, our government on some level has a discourse that's somewhat functional. Am I the only one who thinks that not even just going through the exercise and then pushing it aside is the way things should be? I mean, really, at least pretend like you're doing your freaking job. The Senate has basically said they're on strike, and we're still paying them.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very appropriate way of describing it. And, at a certain point, there's sort of a reason why we have these sort of empty rituals and lip service and whatnot. And I think the fact that it does actually provide some kind of comfort to society at large is actually probably a pretty important aspect of that. So, yeah, I think that's probably something that, should probably be mentioned, just because this really does look like a total and complete breakdown of the government that we elected.
But, I guess looking at this presidential cycle, I'm not really surprised by how crazy the Republicans have gotten. Have you been paying attention to this primary? I mean, you had Donald Trump last night saying, I love uneducated people. I mean, really?
Well, he does. There's bread and butter. Come on. I love my bread and butter.
I mean, really, come on now.
No, that's that is one of those things that would have been surprising 6 months ago, but has now just become another sort of statement from Donald Trump. And this is certainly having an effect on the rest of the party. We've certainly seen people like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio sort of having this rub off on them, and them sort of taking a much different tone in this sort of post-Trump world. And this seems like this could just be the politics of the moment for the GOP. Hopefully there'll be kind of a blowout like we saw back in 68 with Goldwater, and then they'll have to kind of moderate their tone. There are certainly some people there who are kind of predicting that, with Nikki Haley and Paul Ryan and whatnot sort of waiting in the wings. That probably also has a good chance of not happening. There was some more stuff that was said back in 2012 when they did their autopsy on the GOP to figure out what exactly went wrong in that year, and they ultimately determined that they needed to kind of stop being the party of old white people and whatnot, and
old white men.
Forward 4 years later, and they're kind of doubling down on the old white person strategy.
Yeah, I remember the autopsy, and they said they need to reach out to women and be less misogynistic, and yet the guy who's leading the party is probably the biggest misogynist of all.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's this is a complete sort of abandonment of that. It's interesting, of course. At the time, Bobby Jindal was one of the main people who touted the new GOP message in the wake of the 2012 loss. His message was "Don't be stupid," and then we saw him kind of running to the right of everybody else, and probably being one of the more ludicrous candidates on the stage this time around.
Yeah, I still like the voyeur release, where I guess he had somebody hiding in a tree taking a video of him announcing to his kids he was going to run for president. I like the peeping Tom announcement.
Yeah, that's a little strange. What a weird guy. He ran for president. That was a thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember.
It feels so long ago. I mean, but that was a thing.
No, I mean it's scary, and when you say someone like Nikki Haley and Paul Ryan are waiting in the ring in the wings for when the party collapses from being crazy, and going, really, we're going to go to that, and that's going to be moderation? How nuts are we when that is moderation?
Well, I mean, this is a new party. I mean, it's pretty much what Sarah Palin did to our political system, and we have
Exactly.
her and John McCain to thank.
Because this is what I said earlier. I go, imagine, think of 2008. You had Sarah Palin, who kind of made that election cycle fun and kind of crazy, little, off the deep end. And then you had 12 with, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I couldn't have asked for better. Mm-hmm. And now you've got this. I go, what can we expect the next? How bad does it get next time? Does Donald Trump actually shoot a poor, uneducated person and that person vote for him?
That's a really good question. I mean, it really is kind of baffling to think where exactly this could go from here. Initially we believed, of course, there would be no chance that Donald Trump would actually get any traction. We believed, of course, there would be no way that anybody would actually call for the, blocking of immigration for Muslims and whatnot. And then every time that we've, kind of had this gut feeling that America's better than this, that we're not going to fall for that direction, we've seen that kind of go in the exact opposite direction. So, I don't know where exactly we can go from here. And frankly, I don't think there's anything really out there that could shock me.
Yeah, I mean,
short of Donald Trump actually shooting somebody, or short of, him, I guess turning to a life of Zen Buddhism or something.
We fall for it every time.
I know, it's so weird.
It's nuts.
It's frustrating.
And the guy who seems, somewhat, and I've been saying this for a while, Kasich seemed like the moderate guy, and how I kind of at the beginning said this was going to happen is, everyone would be in love with Trump, and Trump would do really, really well for a while, but eventually the Republicans would come to their senses, and then the guy who seemed more moderate, fatherly, who, we're going to be grown-ups, I thought Kasich was going to be that guy, but it looks like the Republicans are saying, hey, you got to go.
Yeah, no, there's a big, level of pressure being put against Kasich to drop out of a race so that this could be consolidated, most likely with Marco Rubio or whatnot. But Kasich is saying that he's going to stay in the race, noting that, they still haven't voted in Ohio yet. He still hopes to have a pretty good Super Tuesday strategy, and essentially saying that if he drops out of a race, ultimately the nomination's going to be going to Trump, since, as he's putting it, he really is the only kind of, viable alternative still on the stage these days, which... I guess frankly is kind of true when you look at how, diminished the GOP has really become in their field right now. Even though he's not necessarily a moderate by any stretch of the imagination, or nearly as much as he kind of, puts himself out there publicly with the New York Times and whatnot, he is much different from Marco Rubio, has become such a kind of crazy hawk in so many ways, and Ted Cruz, who's, simply pretty much unelectable and unlikable, which is a, kind of a fun little mix. And, Donald Trump, who, of course, is, Trump-tastic.
Yeah, he's Trump-tastic. I can't wait for the action figure.
Oh, my God. Do we have to keep on doing this? Can we just... we're smart guys. Can't we just quit our jobs right now and just, leave the country, start a new radio show?
Tell me about it. Because I just had this conversation the other night, and someone said to me, wouldn't it be great if Trump won? You would never have to actually do any preparation. You would just have to go, so what did Donald say today? And that would be your 3 hours.
Yeah. God.
Yeah, I mean, the country would go to hell in a handbag. Although we would be winning. I don't know what we would win, but we would be winning.
Yep, still not worth it. Still not worth it.
Still not worth it. I'm with you. Justin, always great talking to you, man.
Thank you so much. You have a good one, Rick.
Justin Duckham, Talk Media News Service. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show. Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Big news, people, especially for those of you upset by the skyrocketing prices of the essential prescription medicines you take, including thousands of patients who were hit last year with a 5,000% increase in one life-saving drug. Determined to do something about those despised price hikes, drug makers themselves have reached into their corporate toolbox for the two most effective means they have to fix their price problem. Of course, putting more corporate cash into research to produce new medicines would be one of those tools, and a renewed commitment to honest competition would be the other, right? Right. But Big Pharma gave up years ago on doing right, turning to two other corporate tools that have reliably generated a gusher of profits for them: advertising and lobbying. So here they come, wielding bigger-than-ever ad and lobbying budgets to deal with that pesky matter of public anger at drug company price gouging. The intent of the multimillion-dollar PR blitz and intensified offensive in Congress is not to restrain the gouging, but to improve the industry's image in hopes of restraining lawmakers from taking steps to rein in prescription costs. Of course, their ads dishonestly fail to mention this selfish intent, instead pitching drug makers as selfless saviors of humanity. They feature soft scenes of drug researchers in white lab coats urgently trying to find new cures, scripted testimonials from people posed as patients who've been saved by Big Pharma, and, of course, scenes of drug makers altruistically aiding poor people. This is Jim Hightower saying, so, you see, the industry is spending millions on this corporate medicine show not to protect its notorious profiteering, but to protect you from public officials who might try to stop them from overcharging you. These incorrigible gougers are enough to make you sick.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Uganda held presidential elections last Thursday, and Yoweri Museveni, the country's leader since 1986, earned himself another 5 years in office. If it sounds fishy to remain in office that long, you're onto something. Museveni led a campaign to change the constitution in 2005, scrapping term limits to allow him to run in 2006. That was a gift that keeps on giving. European Union monitors who watched the elections said they appreciated high enthusiasm among voters, but they had ample criticisms. The monitors noted intimidation and harassment of opposition by police and law enforcement bodies, and the, quote, harassment and assault of journalists. They also criticized a government raid on the main opposition party political headquarters and the arrest of Museveni's main challenger during the nationwide vote count, saying the action, quote, severely violated freedom of expression. Since Thursday, a total of 4 opposition candidates have been arrested. And a new report by the Stockholm International Peace Institute says the value of the global arms trade continues to increase. The institute compared the 5-year periods beginning in 2006 and 2011, finding a 14% increase in the volume of arms transfers, and a clear geographic shift in the arms trade away from Europe and the Americas, and increasingly to Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Driving the increase in arms exports was China, which is now exporting 90% more weapons per year than it was a decade ago. So where are the weapons heading? The top 5 importers are now India, Saudi Arabia, China, the United Arab Emirates, and Australia, which combine to purchase more than a third of global legal weapons. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Be honest, you look at the big win by Donald Trump and how much he loves the uneducated. And I got to be honest, I got an email here during the break saying, you know what why Donald said he loves the uneducated? He said, well, it's because Nevada ranks 50th in the country in education. 50th in education. They are also 40% of the high school students in Nevada failed to graduate on time. 40%. So no wonder. I love the dumb people. Bring them on. Give me that high school dropout. Wow. They are number one, however, and they are number one in something. Number one in foreclosures. They had the largest number of foreclosures in the country. And yeah, good. Hey, and I would argue that Trump had a lot to do with that. Also ranked 47th in children's health due to the fact that they have a large number of people who are uninsured. 17% of the children in the state do not have health insurance. The national average, 7%. You stop and you look at this stuff, and no wonder they went for the guy who was full of the bluster and the bravado and the chest thumping. Wow. I mean, it's really kind of scary. I mean, it was fun for a bit, and now we're getting to that point where I now know how the folks felt in 1980 who were watching the rise of Reagan. I now kind of get how scary that time was. I remember watching it as a kid going, this is interesting. The actor guy, the guy who did Bonzo Goes to Bitburg or whatever the name of the movie was, he was Bonzo. The guy on TV, he's going to be president of this country? Really? The old senile guy? Yeah. I think what my grandkids will think of us now, the wrestling guy? President? Really? Wow. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. Look forward to seeing you back here. See you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like the tidal flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.
We see the storm out on the horizon. The clouds grow dark in the midnight sky. We feel the fire burning in the belly. The flame leaps out with an angry cry. From the underground where the night is endless. From the mine and rig where our work is done. From every plant and every nation we cry. We are many, we are one. Power, there is power in the union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power in a union of many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, when we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. You fight the power of one with the power of many. You fight the power of evil with the power of right. You fight hatred with love. Fight darkness with light. Power, there is power in a union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There is power in a union of many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. Just like oil, coal, and the atom, we feel the press of the hand of time. Just like the one
we took a concerted effort to go out and find women who had backgrounds that could be qualified to become members of our cabinet. I went to a number of women's groups and said, can you help us find folks? And they brought us whole binders full of women.
Binders full of women, kind of like those he found his wife in. Binders full of women, he's helping them along. Gender equality for the win, as long as you still have time for